The first ancestral race made two seeds, Adam, fruit of life, and Lilith, fruit of knowledge. Each had their own moon and a spear called Longinus. Both seeds landed on Earth. When Lilith landed, her spear broke, Adam went to sleep, and Lilith's special liquid called LCL spread out. All animals and people came from this liquid. In 2000, scientists were playing with Adam and caused a big accident called second impact. Adam turned into a baby-like form, and a boy named Kaworu got Adam's soul. Gendo Ikari made giant robots called Evangelions. Most were copies of Adam, but Unit 1 was a copy of Lilith. Gendo's wife Yui got trapped inside Unit 1, so Gendo launched the Human Instrumentality Project to be with her again. Gendo made a girl named Rei, using parts of Lilith and Yui's DNA. Giant monsters called angels attacked to find either Lilith or Adam. If they found them, all humans would be destroyed. Gendo put Adam inside Rei, then everyone turned into liquid. All people's minds joined together. Shinji decided this wasn't good, so he stopped. There's a lot of channels out there that do Evangelion analysis, and their stuff is great if you're okay with only scratching the surface of Anno's masterpiece. The problem is that it's not enough to get true spiritual enlightenment from the series. I realized what it takes to finally go from a confused viewer to enlightened interpreter. You need symbolic literacy, psychological context, and spiritual grounding. And that's why I created this deep dive into the occultism of Evangelion, after learning from the collective confusion of fans and realizing I had to come up with the missing pieces myself. I finally have a system that works, that's fully complete, one that reveals how Anno crafted not just an anime, but a modern spiritual allegory that addresses humanity's deepest questions about existence, consciousness, and redemption. Before we can decode Evangelion's dense symbolism, we need to understand its mystical foundation. Anno didn't randomly select religious imagery. It deliberately drew from three major esoteric traditions: the Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism centered on understanding divine nature; Enochian magic, a system of angelic communication; Christian mysticism, spiritual practices seeking union with divine reality. They converge on fundamental questions about the nature of the universe, the human condition, the relationship between the individual and the divine. This esoteric framework isn't just decorative. It's the spiritual architecture that supports Evangelion's profound exploration of human destiny, consciousness, and ultimately, redemption. The most prominent mystical symbol in Evangelion is undoubtedly the Tree of Life, a Kabbalistic diagram that appears at the opening of every episode and during pivotal moments throughout the series. In Kabbalistic tradition, the tree represents a map of divine energy, how God's essence manifests and orders itself in reality. It's simultaneously a cosmic diagram of creation, a blueprint of the human psyche, a roadmap for spiritual development. When we see Gendo Ikari's meeting room adorned with this symbol, or when it flashes during instrumentality, we are witnessing more than aesthetic choice. We are seeing the spiritual architecture of Evangelion's universe laid bare. Each major character in Evangelion can be interpreted as an embodiment of one of the Sephiroth, the 10 emanations, or spheres, on the Tree of Life. This multi-Sephirotic approach reflects traditional Kabbalah, where the Sephiroth aren't separate entities, but interconnected aspects of divine emanation that work together as a unified system. Just as human consciousness contains multiple simultaneous aspects, intellect, emotion, will, Evangelion presents characters as complementary expression of spiritual reality. Shinji Ikari corresponds to Yesod, the foundation of personality and emotional reality. His struggle with passivity and his inability to manifest his inner reality in the outer world represents the spiritual challenge of Yesod. His position as Yesod places him as the foundation through which higher spiritual forces must flow to manifest in reality, explaining why he becomes the pivotal decision maker at the series' end. Asuka embodies Tiferet, beauty, compassion, but also ego and duality. Her final battle against the mass-produced Evas isn't merely a physical defeat, It's a spiritual victory where her ego destruction becomes necessary for higher consciousness. Her position as Tiferet, the central balancing point between mercy and judgment, explains her constant struggle between aggression and vulnerability. Reya Yanami represents Bina, understanding and introspection. Her struggle with her sense of disposability parallels Bina's acceptance of destiny. Her position as Bina, the realm of pure understanding beyond emotional attachment, explains her otherworldly nature and ultimate role in facilitating instrumentality. The interactions between these characters, their conflicts, connection, and eventual integration mirror the Kabbalistic concept that true enlightenment comes not from isolating spiritual qualities, but from bringing them into harmony. Their collective journey suggests that spiritual awakening requires integrating these diverse elements rather than choosing between them. Silo's master plan, the Human Instrumentality Project, parallels the Kabbalistic concept of tikkun, or repair of the shattered vessel of creation. In Kabbalistic thought, the original sin caused a cosmic shattering that fragmented divine light, creating separation and suffering. The mystical goal is to repair this shattered reality. In Evangelion, Lilith represents the tree of knowledge. Adam embodies the tree of life. Their separation mirrors humanity's fall from grace. The third impact becomes an opportunity for cosmic reunion. But Anno subverts this paradigm by questioning whether forced unity is truly redemptive. Silo's vision of instrumentality, forced merger of souls, mirrors totalitarian ideologies that sacrifice individuality for collective harmony. What makes Evangelion truly profound is how the angels, seemingly antagonistic entities, function as spiritual catalysts for humanity's evolution. Each angel confronts humanity with specific spiritual lessons drawn from ancient mystical traditions. Throughout the sacred texts of mystical traditions, angels serve as divine messengers who test, transform, and ultimately prepare humanity for spiritual evolution. The angelic hierarchy, described in ancient sources, reveal a profound spiritual journey rather than a mere celestial combatants. Sachiel, the angel of water and mercy, presents a divine trial documented in the book of Raziel, Heptameron, an early Kabbalistic text. This messenger initiates the path of spiritual awakening through the element of water, symbolizing both destruction and purification. Shamshel wields the solar whip of judgment, embodying the essential rite of passage found in the Book of Enoch's accounts of the fallen watchers and solar archetype in mysticism. Through the confrontation with this angel, the soul faces judgment of its worthiness, proceed on the spiritual journey. The angel of thunder and divine fire, Ramiel, reveals a higher plane beyond suffering. Referenced in the Apocalypse of Ezra and Book of Enoch, this angel's appearance signifies the illumination that can only come through tribulation. Israfel, angel of harmony and resurrection, represents duality harmonized, known in Islamic hadith as Israfil, and connected to Raphael in the Book of Tobit. This messenger demonstrates how opposing forces must find balance within the spiritual seeker. The embryonic angel tests creation and birth itself. Talmudic and Kabbalistic texts describe how Sandalphon determines the sex of embryos, symbolizing divine influence over the most fundamental aspect of manifestation. Matarael, angel of rain, and acid tears brings judgment that burns away illusion. Rabbinical mysticism identifies this figure as the angel of rain, both nourishing and eroding depending on what it touches. Saakiel, the angel who falls from the heavens, represents heavenly order broken. The Book of Enoch positions this figure as guardian of the fourth heaven, whose descent signifies cosmic disruption necessary for spiritual evolution. Iraeul, also known as Iriel, the angel of fear and digital possession, embodies confrontation with matriarchal legacy and trauma. Ancient Near Eastern amulets and Jewish folklore contain protection spells against this angel of fear. Leliel, shadow of the self, forces confrontation with the dark night of the soul. The Midrash Tanuma and Talmud Nidra reference the angel Laila, governing night and fate, compelling the spiritual seeker to face their deepest shadows. The possessor, Bardiel, symbolizes ego possession. The Book of Enoch describes Barakiel among the forces of heaven, testing humanity's attachment to illusory self-identity. Zeruel, the arm of God, brings rebirth into God consciousness. Pseudo-Philo's Antiquities of the Jews describe how Zeruel strengthens warriors, representing the divine power that emerges after surrender of the ego. Arael, bird of light and gnosis, delivers unwanted enlightenment. Gnostic texts like Pistis Sophia and John Dee's Enochian writings reference this messenger who forces confrontation with uncomfortable truth. The angel of the womb, Ar-Misael, facilitates spiritual rebirth. Jewish medieval mysticism associates Ar-Misael with the womb, symbolizing the sacred container in which transformation occurs. Tabris, also known as the angel of free will, represents the ultimate choice of humanity over divinity. The Noctemeron by Apollonius of Tyana describes spiritual firmness against adversity, embodying the final test of spiritual will. Each encounter with these divine messengers should not be understood as mere conflict, but as mystical initiation, preparing humanity for the ultimate spiritual choice we will face during the great transformation, whether to remain separate or to transcend into collective consciousness. What makes Evangelion truly profound is Shinji's ultimate choice, a rejection of forced unity in favor of individual existence, despite all its pain. His journey mirrors classic mystical quests, the hero's journey, the fool's arc in Tarot, the soul's ascension toward enlightenment. But instead of transcending humanity, Shinji ultimately embraces it. When he chooses life, the will to live and the courage to carry out, he's making a profound spiritual statement that true divinity isn't found in escape from the human condition, but in the courage to fully embrace it. Ultimately, Evangelion's esoteric symbolism reveals a profound spiritual message that transcendence doesn't come from escaping our humanity, but from fully embracing it, pain, connection, and all. Trauma. Reluctant hero. Shinji seeks approval. Shinji runs from responsibility. Rei reveals quiet, complex loyalty. Precision teamwork defeats Angel. Bonds form. Corporate greed threatens lives. Eva saves day. Asuka arrives. Egos are clashing. Angel attack begins. Synchronized dance defeats duplicate Angel. Trust is rising up. A secret volcano mission tests Asuka's pride and patience. Nerve HQ Total Blackout forces teamwork, revealing characters' deep core dynamics. Evangelion pilots ascend. Humanity cheers. Yet as expected, Kendo stays emotionally distant. A strange computer virus invades Magi. Our dynamic trio must think really fast. Recap, then Rei's minds crack beneath heavy philosophical pressure for our smallest pleasure. Exclusive relationships are deepening, big secrets keep stirring, loneliness silently envelops everyone. It seems inevitable. Shinji is absorbed in San Leliel, ends up facing himself. In the meantime, Misato is blaming herself. New pilot appears from nowhere. Misato investigates Nerve HQ's hidden agenda. Once more, the plot thickens. Against all odds, Toji gets picked as a pilot. Control over hidden shoes. Tragedy follows, crushing Shinji's spirit. Shinji quits for good, broken by guilt and fear, but returns, only to lose control. Unit 1 awakens autonomy. Trapped inside Eva, Shinji contemplates identity, existence. As days go by, Misato ends up getting a sensual massage off-screen. 16 years unfold over 26 minutes. Crucial flashbacks reveal Nervecu's origin, Gendo's real motives, and also tragic human loss. Asuka's weakened mind collapses under pressure. Past trauma surfaces relentlessly. This may mark the darkest moment in the history of animation. Rei's true identity finally unravels. Scylla cannot contain itself any longer and begins executing their master plan. Retsuko fails at holding it. Kaworu arrives, befriends Shinji, then betrays him with heartbreaking grace, yet still manages to steal the hearts of the female audience for some reason. Psyche's shatter, introspection replaces action, meaning breaks down. We get a glimpse into the abstract side of art and self-expression, a well-deserved breather. Instrumentality is at the door, self-acceptance dawns amid fractured reality. The fourth wall crumbles down. We touch the cliché musical ending, so congratulations are mandatory. Your eyes lie. Artists know something about how your eyes see colors that most people don't. In Evangelion, colors aren't just there for decoration. It's used to send hidden messages about the characters and the story. Even if you don't realize it, colors you see are influencing your feelings and how we understand what's happening. It's like color is speaking a language your eyes understand, even if your brain doesn't. If you've ever mixed paints, you know you start with red, yellow, and blue, but inside your eyes, there are tiny parts called cones that are optimized for red, green, and blue instead. This means artists are speaking one color language, while your eyes understand a different one. If there's one color that's the loudest, it's red. Red is powerful, it grabs your attention fast. In Evangelion, red isn't just here for drama, it's a warning, a wound, a signal of something deeper. When you see red in this story, even if you don't notice it right away, reds make you feel like something is wrong or something big is about to happen. But red isn't the only color sending messages. At first, yellow feels bright and happy, like the sun or a smiley face. Yellow in Evangelion can also be a warning. Think of hazard signs, warning lights. Yellow in this world often means pay attention, something's off. It's the uneasy feeling right before things start falling apart. It makes you feel nervous, like something bad might be coming. Yellow here can be tricky. Then there's blue. Blue seems calm and quiet, just like the sky or the ocean. But in Evangelion, blue isn't just peaceful, it's distance, isolation. It's like being underwater where everything is far away and silent. Blue shows up when people feel alone or when they're trying to hide feelings. Sometimes, blue means they're trying to stay in control, but they're struggling inside. It's a quiet color, but there's a lot going on underneath. And then there's purple. Purple is a mix of red and blue. In Evangelion, they crash into each other. Red is danger, blue is loneliness. Purple puts both together and it feels strange. It's not normal. Purple is the color of the EVA Unit 1. It's not fully a robot, not fully a person. It's caught between two worlds, just like Shinji. Purple feels otherworldly, almost spiritual, yet still threatening. It tells you this isn't normal. This is something beyond understanding, powerful, unstable. Purple means something powerful, but also scary. When you see purple, it's a sign things are getting out of control. The line between human and monster starts to disappear. Now, let's talk about green. Usually, green means life, like plants or trees, but in Evangelion, green feels weird. It's too bright, too strong. The glow of the Eva's eyes, explosions, the strange lights that don't belong in the real world. It's the color of something alive, but not human, something alien. When green shows up, it's a reminder that what you're seeing is beyond science, beyond control. Green feels creepy. It's life, but not the kind we know. When green shows up, it's a sign that things are no longer safe or normal. Then there's orange. Orange is warm, like a sunset or a campfire. In Evangelion, orange often shows up when something is ending. It's the color of explosions or skies before something bad happens. Orange means there's a choice to make, and once it's made, there's no going back. It's not as loud as red, but it still means danger. Orange is like a fire that burns everything down. When you see orange, it's too late. Things are already falling apart. And finally, we have black and white. They're opposites. White looks clean, like a blank page. or fresh snow, but in Evangelion, it can feel empty. It's the void, erasure. It's what's left when everything else is gone. White isn't peace, it's absence. It's the end of the world, when there's nothing left but silence. White is what's there when everything is gone. And black is the unknown. It's like a dark room where you don't know what's hiding inside. Black feels heavy and lonely. In Evangelion, black is everywhere when people are cut off from each other. The color of fear, of not knowing what's out there or what's inside yourself. In Evangelion, black swallows everything. It's the entry plug stretching tight. The Eva's mouth opening wide. The endless space between people who can't connect. It's a color of fear and emptiness. Even though black and white are different, in Evangelion they can mean the same thing. Being alone, having nothing left, asking the question, what happens when everything ends? I called in Sigils to polish this Angel's ranking chart. Starting off with Akiel. Threat level, 2 stars. Power rarity, 2 stars. Trauma boost, 3 stars. Design, 2 stars. Plot impact, 5 stars. A respectable kaiju with great curb appeal and generational trauma launching finesse. Opens like a tutorial boss, punches like a prologue to your breakdown. Shamshell, threat level, 2 stars. Power rarity, 2 stars. Trauma boost, 2 stars. Design, 3 stars. Plot impact, 2 stars. Tentacle lightsaber bug basically looks cool while accomplishing very little. Ramiel. Threat level, 5 stars. Power rarity, 5 stars. Trauma boost, 4 stars. Design, 5 out of 5, definitely. Plot impact, 4 stars. Screams like a fax machine and revolutionizes angel combat. Gagiel, threat level 2 stars. Power rarity, 1 star. Trauma boost, yeah, that's 0 star. Design, 2 stars. Plot impact, 2 stars. Jaws rebooted with filler flavor. Proves Evangelion Unit 2 floats. Nothing else. Israfel. Threat level 2 stars. Power rarity 4 stars. Trauma boost 2 stars. Design 3 stars. Plot impact 3 stars. 2 angels, 1 brain cell. Forces a DDR sync battle just to prove teamwork is pain. Sandalphon, threat level 2 stars. Power rarity 3 stars. Trauma boost 1 star. Can't go any higher than that. Design 3 stars. Plot impact 2 stars. Magma Shrimp with boundary issues. Warm up for better episodes. Matarael, threat level 3 stars. Power rarity 3 stars. Trauma boost 1 star. 1 star. Design 3 stars. Plot impact 2 stars. Just a very wet spider. Sarakiel, threat level 4 stars. Power rarity 4 stars. Trauma boost 3 stars. Design 4 stars. Plot impact 3 stars. Makes the entire city a quick time event minigame, turning Tokyo 3 into a city-sized game of catch. Irreal, threat level 3 stars. Power rarity 5 stars. Trauma boost 4 stars. Design 2 stars. Plot impact 3 stars. Evangelion meets malware, axe nerf while waking up now cause AI ghost. Leiel, threat level 5 stars. Power rarity 5 stars. Trauma boost 5 stars. Design 5 stars. Plot impact 4 stars. Shadow with a stomach swallows Shinji while providing a therapy session. It's Nietzsche's black hole. Bardiel, threat level 3 stars. Power rarity 4 stars. Trauma boost 5 stars. Design 2 stars. Plot impact 4 stars. Mold that causes TK. Shinji hits uninstall on trust. Zerbiel, threat level 5 stars. Power rarity 3 stars. Trauma boost 4 stars. Design 4 stars. Plot impact, 5 stars. Final boss vibes, dismembers everything, Shinjiri quits the world. RL, threat level 2 stars. Power rarity 5 stars. Trauma boost 5 stars. Design 2 stars. Plot impact 5 stars. The satellite that turned Asuka into a diagnosis, prop for psychologically dissecting Asuka from orbit. Army Cell, threat level 3 stars. Power rarity 4 stars. Trauma boost 5 stars. Design 3 stars. Plot impact 5 stars. DNA horror string that fuses and confesses. Rei dies for the 3rd time. It's not even surprising anymore. Kawole, threat level 4 stars. Power rarity 4 stars. Trauma boost 5 stars. Design, let's go with 3 stars. Plot impact 5 stars. Kawole scores highly across all categories as the most complex humanoid. Adam, threat level 5 stars. Power rarity 5 stars. Trauma boost 5 stars. Design 5 stars. Plot impact 5 stars. Would delete humanity for breakfast. 10 out of 10 lore. So there you have it. Adam stands alone as P-Perfect, absolute and final. Ramiel and Neliel show that abstract, non-humanoid forms are far scarier than classic kaiju. In this review, I'm breaking down which episodes deliver max emotional damage and which ones are just filler side quests in a plug suit. S tier, legendary difficulty cleared. These episodes shift the meta, spike emotional loadouts, or act as tactical set pieces that permanently reshape the narrative battlefield. Episode 24, the Kawole patch, late game DLC character drops, immediately breaks the balance. Shinji is hit with full emotional vulnerability debuff, while Kawole soft launches human intimacy at level 99. The soundtrack, the betrayal, the precision pacing, this is the final boss fight where your controller disconnects mid-execution. Episode 18, Friendly Fire Enabled. PvP trauma event. You're forced to engage a friend turn enemy with no spare option. The emotional permadeath is brutal. Shinji goes from indecisive player to broken red leader in under 10 minutes. The post-mission cutscene, max level despair. Episode 22 Director's Cut. Asuka's core meltdown. The glass cannon finally shatters. Visuals glitch. Sound design fractures. And the internal monologue is broadcast like corrupted data. If episode 24 is the final boss, this is the last checkpoint before you lose your best weapon. Episode 19, Watermelon Wake buff. Post-collapse Shinji rage quits, but Kaji's support gardening side quest delivers a quiet charisma regen. Shinji re-enters the field with full berserker mode unlocked, pure cinematic adrenaline, Angel gets bodied. Episode 9, Rhythm Sync training arc. Combat mechanics overhaul, co-op mode unlocked, Shinji and Asuka's sync rate becomes the game's most satisfying real-time strategy system. Ends with a mech battle so clean, it could have been mock-upped. Episode 23, Clone Reveal Protocol. Lore payload delivered with surgical emotional precision. Rei's mystery detonates. Gendo's trust bar hits 0 across the squad. No one's loadout is stable after this mission. Episode 8, New Teammate Deployed. Asuka enters the roster with full aggro build, pulling DPS and attention alike. PvE escort mission on open water turns into an S-rank intro cinematic. Pacing surges. Team dynamics rewire overnight. A tier, core missions, high value. These episodes lock in character arcs, expand mission lore, and optimize emotional mechanics. Not every hit is a headshot, but they're mission critical. Episode 1, Tutorial with Byte, sets up the UI, the factions, the pilot interface, and the main threat. Features a playable cutscene that actually delivers, and yes, the opening song loads into your brain startup sequence permanently. Episode 4, Shinji's first solo walkout, minimal combat, high internal conflict. The city becomes a maze of social aggro zones. Quiet build-up episode that turns every moment through restraint, pure narrative stamina check. Episode 15, Dialogue 3 expansion, big lore drops, double action flags raised, and the infamous kiss sequence activated. No action, just stat heavy exposition and raw tension. It's like unlocking 12 cutscenes back to back. Episode 16, Psychic Arena Match. Shinji gets soft-locked inside an existential rift, reality breaks, identity fragments, and the series reveals its final genre, psychological horror. This is a mind map fight with no UI. Episode 17, New Draft Alert. Toji gets recruited behind the scenes. This is the Uh-Oh mission, suspicion rises, viewer dread maxes out, knowing what's coming next. Classic build-up chapter. Episode 20, Respawn Event. Shinji's LCL disintegration sequence is a high-concept respawn mechanic. His physical stats hit 0, but his narrative weight doubles. Also features major lore drops about identity, origin, and the goo we're all made of. Episode 21, Flashback Arc, Complete Edition. The curtain finally lifts. We get the dev notes on Gendo's rise, Nerve's foundation, and the origin of the current class. Everything you thought was random, not random. Hard lore, full sync with previous data unlocked. B tier, clean missions, fewer stakes, reliable chapters with specific functions, team building, plot glue, or support XP. Not flashy, but every squad needs a solid medic. Episode 2, post-battle debrief. Flashbacks, trauma upload, first sign of Shinji's passive-aggressive skill tree. Strong follow-up to episode 1, but plays like a recovery chapter. Episode 3, social combat tutorial. New characters added to the support roster. Asuka has entered LV8, so the team is on rookie settings. Ends with a mini boss evac under pressure. Episode 6, boss battle, Ramiel. Sharpest tactical encounter of early game, precision sniping, energy recharge timer, and a clutch rescue scene. MVP moment for Rei's smile emote. Episode 11, offline mode activated, powers down, teamworks up. First true trio mission, low stakes but well paced. Strong character synergy bonuses unlocked. Episode 13, base defense protocol. The Angel goes digital, Nerve scrambles with no mech support, Letsuko clutches with a firewall kill, weird format but a refreshing mechanic. C tier, optional side content, not broken, but underwhelming. You could skip these and still get 100% completion. Episodes 25 and 26, debug mode enabled. The game crashes and boots into a developer diary. Characters get replaced with a placeholder sprites and talk about the concept of endings. Best viewed post-end of Evangelion patch. Episode 5, pacing bug detected. Setup episode with one iconic anime trope that aged like milk, needed more polish or better cutscene editor. Episode 7, Jetalon collab event. Feels like a non-canon crossover between Evangelion and a mid-tier mobile tactics scene. Minimal impact on core story loop. Episode 12, Orbital Strike mission. Big scale, low payoff. Angel looks cool, but it's mostly aesthetic. Shinji levels up in confidence, but the stakes not hit. F tier, broken mechanics, low replay value. These episodes are the escort quest of Evangelion. Poor pacing, minimal stakes, or a full-on recap file. Episode 10, Volcano Suit side mission. Clunky mech physics, bathhouse filler, and a mini boss that could have been patched out. episode 14, recap dump, half a rerun, half an out of context Ray montage. The only challenge is staying awake. Could have been a codex entry. Evangelion revolutionized mech anime by implementing the most brutal achievement in animation, creating character arcs where psychological damage carries permanent debuffs. Its lasting impact proves that sometimes the most punishing gameplay creates the most devoted fan base. Evangelion is a slow-motion emotional collapse played through teenage angst. A psychological breakdown packaged as mecha anime, where the real battles are fought in Tokyo Tree's avenues, but in the broken mindscapes of its pilots. And if Nerve is the stage, then Shinji Ikari's stationary digital audio tape player is the conductor. Shinji Ikari is the anxiety-riddled, chronically underparented teen chosen to pilot Evangelion Unit 1, basically humanity's last hope, because sure, why not give the fate of Earth to a kid with abandonment issues? This is a boy who flinches at his own shadow, whose default setting is flight rather than fight, suddenly expected to merge his consciousness. It's like handing the nuclear launch codes to the kid who gets panic attacks ordering at McDonald's. But forget the EBA unit for a second, let's talk about the SD80 player. It's not just a retroflex, it's a character, a motif, a symbol, the silent narrator of Evangelion's emotional landscape. Sony's SD80, or stationary digital audio tape, is like the spiritual successor to the cassette tape player, lost to time in our timeline, but preserved in Evangelion's broken mirror of one. In our world, these devices vanished into technological obsolescence. In Shinji's world, they are lifelines. The SD80 is deliberately anachronistic, even within the show's universe. By 2015, when Evangelion takes place, digital music would have evolved far beyond portable cassette tape players. Yet, Shinji clings to this outdated technology because it's not about convenience, it's about connection. Now, some of you out there might think, oh, it's just aesthetic. There's more under the hood. Like most things in Evangelion, the SD80 isn't there by accident. It means something. It's a physical manifestation of Shinji's relationship with his absent father, outdated, one-directional, playing the same messages on repeat with no chance of response. A relationship where Shinji can only receive, never transmit. See, Shinji isn't just listening to music. He's hiding, he's building a wall, track by track, loop by loop. Because when your dad sends you to fight angels but won't return your phone calls, when your mother's soul is trapped in the very machine you pilot, when your roommate emotional stability makes Nitro look stable, well, you retreat into a machine, into a moment, into music. The SD80 player becomes his isolation pod, his iPod if you will. His denial bubble is only anchor to what used to be normal. As Tokyo Tree crumbles, while existential dread thickens in the air like fog, Shinji's just out there skipping tracks. Notice how he uses it. Earbuds in, volume up, eyes closed. It's not background noise, it's foreground escape. Every time reality becomes too jagged, too demanding, those earbuds going like emotional circuit records. And yes, track 25 and 26, we'll get to that. But for now, let's focus on the SD80 itself. This thing's slick, minimalist, quiet, just like Shinji wishes it could be. It represents personal space, autonomy, his last little corner of the universe that doesn't demand something from him. It's not a Walkman, it's a shield, a coping mechanism wrapped in Sony branding. The SD80 has physical buttons: rewind, fast forward, play, stop, simple binary commands that make sense in a world where nothing else does. Shinji can control this machine in ways he can't control his EBA unit, his emotions, or the apocalyptic scenario unfolding around him. When everything else is chaos, synchronization rates, AT fields, human instrumentality, the SD80 operates on predictable logic. Push play, music plays. Push stop, silence returns. It's the only relationship in his life with clear boundaries and consistent outcomes. And have you noticed? The SD80 never breaks. In a show where technology routinely fails catastrophically, where giant robots go berserk and computers get hacked by angels, this humble music player works flawlessly. Because it has to. Because if Shinji's last refuge fell lame, there'd be nothing left. And the tracks, they are not random. They are the emotional B-sides of his psyche. It's a musical equivalent of Fetal Position, a sonic cocoon when words fail and actions terrify. That jazzy, oddly upbeat loop, it's irony in musical form. The tune says hope, but the context screams, you're not okay. It's dissonance by design, the audio version of Shinji's fourth smile, and when the track switches mid-scene, that's Shinji switching moods. Or maybe desperately trying to. Moving forward, it almost seems like this SD80 player is on both random and loop modes simultaneously. In episode 2, when Blue Legend cuts to You Are the Only One, it's not just changing songs. It's Shinji frantically turning the dial on his emotional thermostat, trying to find a temperature where existence feels bearable. Music for him isn't just background, it's lifeline, it's therapy, it's the closest thing to a parent's whisper that this abandoned child has. And then, out of nowhere, we get this game soundtrack, deep cuts. Yes, this confirms what we always suspected. Shinji's a gamer. He's not just a pilot, he's also a teenager who plays JRPGs and gets lost in chiptune nostalgia. A reminder, he's still a kid, just one with the weight of humanity on his shoulders. The Is soundtrack isn't random either. It's from a game about a young hero dressed into saving a world he barely understands, fighting monsters that shouldn't exist, meeting people who need him despite his inexperience. Sounds familiar? Shinji's living his own twisted JRPG, minus the level ups, plus the psychological trauma. So yeah, let's break down what we actually get to hear through his earbuds. In episode 4, we get to hear Blue Legend, and You Are the Only One, taken from Lilia from Is. These tracks show how Shinji, despite his extraordinary circumstances, is still just a kid who plays video games. Blue Legend amplifies his sadness, while You Are the Only One reflects his desperate desire to connect with someone, anyone, in a meaningful way. He's listening to the soundtrack of a life parallel to his own, with clear objectives and winnable battles. In episode 15, the track You Are the Only One makes a comeback. It's played as Asuka asks Shinji to kiss her, making the song's return remarkably appropriate. The longing in this melody mirrors Shinji's growing desire to form connections, despite his fear of rejection, the eternal paradox of the hedgehog's dilemma. When this track plays, as he contemplates Asuka, it's not just background music. It's a window into his confused teenage heart, struggling with feelings that he doesn't have the emotional vocabulary to express. Background music, A2 by Shiro Sageso. An upbeat, punchy piece clashes with Shinji's initial reluctance and fear. Notice how it plays during moments when he's overwhelmed by the responsibility thrust upon him. He's against what awaits him, a musical foreshadowing that his actions are merely delaying the inevitable. It's not just setting the mood, it's establishing his emotional baseline, apprehension, uncertainty, and resignation. Before Fly Me to the Moon by Shiro Sagesu, this iconic track of the series highlights the same emotions Shinji experiences, the desire to escape, to be anywhere but here. A jazzy, hopeful tune, but juxtaposed with the grim reality of his situation. It becomes deeply ironic. Fly Me to the Moon isn't just a romantic fantasy. It's Shinji's desperate wish to escape Earth altogether, to flee the responsibilities, the EVA unit, the angels, his father. The moon represents that impossible distance he craves from his own life. Shinji probably plays this song when he needs variety from the BGM on constant repeat. Because if this guy's gonna be plugged in all the time, there needs to be some sort of variety, right? In episode 23, we get to hear Yote Hippai no Yume. Here, we return almost to normalcy as Shinji recovers from a dire event. The song title translates to both ends full of dreams, suggesting that with help, Shinji has found hope to continue, or at least the illusion of it. This track plays during one of his brief moments of calm before third impact, before everything falls apart completely. It's the musical equivalent of a deep breath before the plunge. In episode 24, we get to hear Ode to Joy by Beethoven. As the end of the world approaches, Shinji listens to Beethoven's masterpiece. A song to inspire the end of the world? Well, it's Beethoven, so it's definitely matching. Ode to Joy isn't just any classical piece, it's a celebration of universal brotherhood, of humanity united as one, playing as Kaworu reveals himself as an angel, as Seele accelerates its plans for a human instrumentality. This music foreshadows the forced unity that awaits humanity, the perfect soundtrack for what's coming. Let's get back to tracks 25 and 26. The theory that the final two episodes of Evangelion mirror the last tracks on Shinji's SDAT, a mental breakdown told in music, chaos, introspection, collapse, and maybe, just maybe, acceptance. They exist as potential, as mystery, just like the potential within Shinji that finally emerges in those final mind-bending episodes. Maybe track 25 is the sound of disconstruction of identity. Maybe track 26 is reconstruction, the sonic equivalent of I might be worthy of life after all. Empty space on the tape, waiting for Shinji to record his own conclusion, his own choice. Because in the end, Shinji doesn't beat the system. He doesn't win. He chooses to exist. He says, I am me. And in a series where identity is vague and nothing is real for long, that's the most rebellious act possible. The SDAT presence is powerful, but its absence speaks volume too. Notice when Shinji doesn't reach for it. Those rare moments when he's either completely present or utterly broken. When he decides to pilot Unit 1 to protect his friends, the SDAT stays in his pocket. When he sits silently in a devastated nerve after Kaworu's death, there's no music to hide behind. These are the moments when Shinji faces reality unfiltered, when he can't or won't retreat, when he's forced to engage with his actual life rather than live in the limbo between tracks. And in the end, after human instrumentality, after the sea of LCL and the choice to return to physical form with all its pain and possibility, we don't see the SDAT. Because maybe, just maybe, Shinji doesn't need it anymore. The SDAT isn't filler, it's form and function, a sonic mirror reflecting Shinji's internal apocalypse. Every track is a heartbeat, every skip a cry for help, every loop a desperate attempt to pause time before it gets worse. It's an brilliant shorthand for emotional state. It's character development embedded in prop. It's not just music. It's the quietest scream in anime history. And in a show where characters routinely shout their lungs out while piloting giant robots, it's often the SD80s whispered melodies that speak the loudest truth about human condition. You ever met a girl like Misato? You know the type fun, wild, always down for a drink, but beyond all that, a complete wreck. The forced smile, the over-the-top personality, the chaos, none of it is random. It's not just who she is, it's survival mode dressed up as confidence. She's the girl chugging beers for breakfast, making bad decisions at 2 a.m., just in case she needs an ego boost. It looks fun from the outside, but let's call it what it is. Self-destruction on autopilot. This isn't about bashing anyone, it's about recognizing the pattern and, if she's willing, breaking the cycle. Her past, not her fault. Maybe she had a neglectful dad. Maybe she got burned one too many times. Maybe she just grew up thinking love meant instability. But her coping mechanisms, the drinking, the casual hookups, the inappropriate boundaries, that's all on her. That morning beer, not just a quirky habit, it's avoidance. That free spirit act, fear in a push-up bra. And those relationships, they scream abandonment issues louder than any ignored voicemail. She's been using the same broken playbook for years, and guess what? It's why her life is a dumpster fire. Now, imagine a girl who doesn't need my validation to feel worthy. One who communicates instead of manipulating, who builds real relationships instead of running from them. That version exists, but it takes work. So now let's see how we can, break the cycle. Step 1, kill the morning beer ritual. That Ebisu for breakfast routine, it's stunting her. Her brain is marinating in alcohol to avoid processing her past. 2 weeks without it, and emotions she hasn't felt in years will start creeping back in. That's terrifying, but also necessary. Step 2, build an identity beyond hot mess. The revealing outfits, they're just a defense mechanism. Every time she uses sex appeal as a crutch, she's reinforcing the belief that her worth is tied to being desired. If she started setting real boundaries, if she stopped treating every interaction like a game of please don't leave me, she might actually build something real. Step 3, drop the persona, find the person. Let's be honest, the way she acts around different people, the version of her that jokes around with close friends versus the one turning on the charm for attention, one is real, the other is a survival tactic. Instead of flirting or playing mind games to get what she wants, what if she just asked? Next time she's about to send a suggestive photo or drop a passive-aggressive comment, she should stop and think, what's the real message here? Is it, please don't leave me, or I need reassurance? Because, believe it or not, saying it out loud actually works better than all the manipulation tactics in the world. A lot of these girls build their entire lives around proving something, usually to a dad who left or a world they think doesn't respect them. That's fine as motivation, but at some point the I'll show them attitude needs to turn into something real. What does she actually stand for? What does she want to build that has nothing to do with being wanted? If she can't answer that, then yeah, she's still stuck. This isn't about turning into some boring, rule-following robot. It's about finally dealing with the stuff that's been weighing her down for years. No more using alcohol to numb emotions. No more treating relationships like a battlefield. No more chasing validation from people who barely care. Trauma might have shaped her, but it doesn't have to define her. Either she makes the effort to break out of the cycle, or she stays stuck in the same loop forever. Classic INTP. Quiet, logical, lost in thought, and awkward at parties. She's the waifu for anyone who's ever zoned out during small talk and wondered about the flaws of the names of each defense. If you lock away feelings like classified documents, you're channeling Ray. Just don't expect her to remember your birthday. Now, ask her ENTJ cranked up to 11. Assertive, competitive, brutally honest, always the main character in every room she enters. She'll call you out, then drag you into adventures you never asked for. It'll be a while before someone can hold their ground debating her. Hikari, the class rep, is all ESFJ, responsible, caring, and just bossy enough to keep everyone functional. She's the mom friend, keeping everyone in line while secretly enabling their worst habits. Misato is pure ENFJ, warm, messy, impossibly caring, yet somehow heroic amid complete chaos. ENFJs are the life of the party and the shoulder everyone cries on while they're having their own breakdown. But let's not forget the unsung waifus lurking in the background. Letsuko, ISTJ, the eternal planner. Detail-driven, competent, single-handedly running everything behind the scenes until her own messy feelings catch up. She's got plans for her plans, except when it comes to matters of the heart. Maya's a bona fide ISFJ, quietly supportive, first to help in any crisis while asking for absolutely nothing in return. She remembers everyone's coffee order, their birthdays, and probably their childhood trauma. The backbone of any organization, criminally underappreciated. Yui Kari, the enigmatic INFJ, visionary, gentle, quietly pulling all the strings from beyond the grave. INFJ by the book, smiling softly while adverting world-ending scenarios. Naoko Akagi, pure INTJ, strategic, coldly logical, always planning 10 moves ahead, while everyone else is figuring out to move one. She's your typical misunderstood genius who accidentally creates the apocalypse while trying to solve daddy issues through technology. There you go, every Evangelion waifu perfectly boxed into a 4-letter fantasy. First, you'll notice that one Evangelion character really stands out to you, and then you'll be able to learn something cool about yourself. By the end of this video, you'll see how easy it is to understand yourself better, and then you'll be able to appreciate these anime characters on a whole new level. Let's begin with Rei Ayanami, the Enigma, the silent one. If you're drawn to Rei, you likely value depth over surface level connection. You find comfort in silence and are fascinated by people who maintain emotional distance while still containing incredible depth. Rei lovers tend to be introspective, sometimes to a fault. You probably appreciate minimalism, not just aesthetically, but emotionally. Your attraction to her character might indicate that you see yourself as someone who has been molded by external expectations rather than internal desires. The question isn't whether you like Rei, it's whether you recognize parts of yourself in her struggle to discover personhood beyond what others have assigned to her. Those drawn to Rei often harbor a quiet fear that perhaps, like her, they might be replaceable, that their value lies in utility rather than existence. Then there's Asuka Langley's Olio. Brilliant, fierce, broken. If Asuka resonates with you, you likely understand the exhaustion of performance, of excellence as survival. You know what it's like to craft an impenetrable exterior because vulnerability feels like annihilation. What's fascinating about Asuka fans is that they're often struggling with the precise tension that defines our character. The need for connection versus the terror of rejection. You recognize the painful irony that pushing people away is sometimes an indirect plea for someone to stay anyway. Your attraction to Asuka might reveal something crucial about your understanding of strength. You know instinctively that true strength isn't about never breaking, it's about continuing despite the cracks. Hikari Araki represents something increasingly rare in Evangelion's world: normalcy, maintained through structure and care. If you're drawn to Hikari, you likely value order not for its own sake, but for the stability it provides. You understand that sometimes, in a world of constant change, maintaining routine is its own form of courage. Your attraction to Hikari might reveal your own belief in the power of small acts of care, that sometimes love is expressed not in a grand gestures, but in consistent presence and practical support. Misato Katsuragi represents something different altogether. The adult who hasn't quite figured out adulthood. If you're drawn to Misato, you likely appreciate authenticity over perfection. You understand that maturity isn't about having everything together. It's about taking responsibility despite your mess. What's telling about your connection to Misato is how you relate to contradictions. You're comfortable with the idea that people contain multitudes, that the same person can be both a tactical genius and emotionally stunted, professional and childish, nurturing and neglectful. Your attraction to Misato might indicate that you've made peace with your own contradictions, or perhaps, more accurately, that you're working toward that peace. Ritsuko Akagi represents intelligence weaponized against itself. If you're drawn to Ritsuko, you likely respect analytical minds and technique mastery. You understand that intelligence doesn't inoculate against emotional vulnerability. Sometimes it just gives you more sophisticated ways to rationalize poor choices. Your attraction to Ritsuko, it reveals your own struggle between intellect and emotion, between knowing the rational choice and making the human one. Maya Ibuki presents a different archetype altogether. The loyal technician, the devoted student. If you're drawn to Maya, you likely value dedication and sincerity. You appreciate those who approach their work not just with competence, but with genuine belief in its purpose. Your attraction to Maya might indicate that you value loyalty. You see devotion not as weakness, but as a form of integrity. Yui Kari exists in Evangelion as both absence and omnipresence, the mother who sacrificed everything to protect her child. If you're drawn to Yui, you likely value profound devotion and self-sacrifice. You understand that sometimes love requires terrible choices and unimaginable commitment. What's revealing about your connection to Yui is your relationship with protection and sacrifice. You recognize that sometimes the greatest acts of love occur outside the boundaries of normal human interaction, that protection sometimes requires transformation. Your attraction to Yui might indicate that you might believe the ultimate expression of love is not presence, but preservation, that you understand how absence itself can be a form of profound care when physical presence is impossible. Naoko Akagi represents the brilliant mind consumed by emotion, the architect of technological marvel, undone by primal jealousy. If you're drawn to Naoko, you likely understand the tension between professional achievement and personal fulfillment. You appreciate the tragedy of someone whose legacy outlives them, but does so in ways they never intended. What's fascinating about your connection to Naoko is your relationship with legacy and control. You recognize the irony that her greatest creation, the Magi system, contains the very emotional complexity that led to her downfall. Your attraction to Naoko might indicate that you understand how her greatest strengths and most devastating weaknesses often spring from the same source. That brilliance and emotional vulnerability aren't opposite. Every character in Evangelion is broken in their own way. Your resonance with any of them isn't about preference, it's about recognition. The characters we connect with often reflect our own wounds, fears, and aspirations. They externalize parts of ourselves we struggle to articulate. So what does your Evangelion waifu say about you? That you're human, that you contain contradictions and complexities, that you're drawn to characters who articulate your own struggles in ways you might not be able to express. I spent 14 hours ranking Evangelion waifu using a system built on vibes, delusion, and academic fraud. And you know what? I regret nothing. Let's start off with Rei Ayanami. Emotional stability, 2 stars. Communication skills, 1 star. Combat competence, 4 stars. Domestic compatibility, 2 stars. Waifu energy, 4 stars. Feels like dating a meaningful silence. Perfect for fans of quiet suffering and clone existentialism. Also comes with 1 deeply uncomfortable Gendo association. Asuka Langless Oreo. Emotional stability, I've got to go with 1 star. Communication skills, 2 stars. Combat competence, 5 stars. Domestic compatibility, 2 stars. Waifu energy, 5 stars. She'd insult you in German, and you'd say, "Gets who died." Built-in volume issues may cause bruised ego and minor property damage. Hikari Araki, emotional stability, 4 stars. Communication skills, 4 stars. Combat competence, 1 star. Domestic compatibility, 5 stars. Waifu energy, 2 stars. She packs bento, she packs judgment, she packs mom wife energy. Can manage children, classmates, and your entire emotional deficit without raising her voice. Misato Katsuragi. Emotional stability, 3 stars. Communication skills, 4 stars. Combat competence, 4 stars. Domestic compatibility, I've got to go with 0. Waifu energy, 5 stars. Hot, tragic, functional alcoholic, the full package. Guns, and existential dread cuddles. Mitsuko Akagi. Emotional stability, 2 stars. Communication skills, 3 stars. Combat competence, 2 stars. Domestic compatibility, 3 stars. Waifu energy, 2 stars. She'd ghost you by deleting your existence from an LDAP server. Talk dirty to her about compression protocols. Maya Ibuke. Emotional stability, 3 stars. Communication skills, 3 stars. Combat competence, 0 star. Domestic compatibility, 3 stars. Waifu energy, 3 stars. Tech girl with a light stomach and a heart of gold. Needs a hug, will short circuit if you give her one. Yui Kari. Emotional stability, 2 stars. Communication skills, 3 stars. Combat competence, 5 stars. Domestic compatibility, 2 stars. Waifu energy, 2 stars. You'll never be alone again. Seriously, never. Naoko Akagi. Emotional stability, 1 star. Communication skills, 3 stars. Combat competence, 2 stars. Domestic compatibility, 1 star. Waifu energy, 2 stars. Built an AI of herself, definitely a red flag. Trauma exists running in the background permanently. After rigorous scientific analysis, here's what Anno has been trying to tell us all along. There is no perfect waifu in Evangelion. Hikari Araki and Misato Katsuragi die at 16 out of 25, which means the highest possible relationship satisfaction rate is 64%. In any other anime, this would be considered as a manufacturing defect. In Evangelion, it's by design. Nothing says best girl like solving the trolley problem. Let's kick off with Rei. Rei stares blankly at the lever for a full minute, considers the futility of existence, and pulls it only because Gendo told her to. 5 people saved, 1 resting in pieces. Rei walks away without a word, 10 out of 10. Asuka doesn't even blink, pulls the lever, saves 5, then yells at everyone for hesitating. If you died, nothing personal, kid. Chaos, 100%. Empathy, not available. Hikari, also student council meeting in her head, makes a pro versus con list and pulls the lever because it's what's expected of a class rep. Then she writes herself up and brings Bento to the funeral. Misato doesn't see a moral problem, she sees an engineering challenge. She derails the trolley, blows up the tracks, saves everyone, and then celebrates with a can. Halfway through, and so far only Misato hasn't caused an existential meltdown. Retsuko pauses to run a full simulation, analyzes every possible outcome, and then pulls the lever based on pure statistics, while everyone else processes their trauma. Maya freezes. She wants to help but can't decide without Ritsuko's approval. In the end, the system crashes, nobody is saved, she still gets fan mail for being adorable. Yui just climbs onto the tracks and saves everyone herself. The trolley is stopped by sheer maternal energy, nobody dies, Shinji still cries. Classic. Naoko doesn't pull the lever, she reroutes the trolley to enemies and calls it science. Zero hesitation, maximum drama. The real trolley problem is picking just one waifu. Last time, I reveal what your Evangelion waifu says about you. This time, I'm calling out your degeneracy. If your waifu is Rei, Asuka, or Hikari, congrats. You just booked a front seat to Christensen's party van. If you're into Misato, you need a therapist, not a waifu. You're looking for a mother figure and a train wreck at the same time. Beta energy, but at least you're legal. Letsuko fans? The intellectual masochist. You want to be ignored by a woman who treats you like a research project, and you probably own a cat. Maya? Cute? Safe option. She's got her own crush, and you're just background. Dream bigger, chief. If you picked Yui, you're self-inserting as Fuyotsuki. You're down so bad. You'll raise her son for a shot at her, but Gendo still won. You're terraforming in the friend zone. Pick cuck energy. Naoko, unless you're still in denial, history will decide if you're a pioneer or a lost cause. Until then, enjoy Bingo Night. Right now, someone is watching Evangelion for the first time and completely missing what makes this anime a masterpiece. Hideaki Anno crafted each major character to embody one of the 7 deadly sins. There are 2 types of Evangelion fans, those who truly understand the characters and those who don't. And if you're watching this video, chances are you're tired of surface-level essays that miss the devastating psychological core. After studying the colors, the food, the design, and hundreds of frames of animation that most viewers miss, I've uncovered the deliberate pattern that explains why this character feels so painfully human, and why their story still resonates 30 years later. Let's start with the architect of humanity's near destruction, Gendo Ikari. Gendo doesn't just have pride, he is pride incarnate. Cold, calculating, and convinced he alone knows what's best for the entire human race. Notice how Anno frames him visually, always above others, hands folded in front of his face, glasses hiding his eyes. These aren't random choices. They visually represent a man who sees himself as superior, who hides his emotions, who manipulates everyone around him. His ultimate goal, to trigger the third impact and reunite with his dead wife Yui by remaking reality itself. That's pride on a god tier level. But here's what most viewers miss. Gendo's pride isn't strength, it's weakness. It's his inability to process grief normally. Rather than face his pain, he chooses to destroy the world and rebuild it on his own terms. Then, there's Asuka Langley Soryu, wrath personified. What makes Asuka's character so brilliant isn't just her anger, it's how that anger functions as armor. Every explosive outburst, every cruel comment, every reckless battle charge, they're all defensive moves. Remember the devastating scene where we see our childhood trauma, our mother's suicide, the doll that received all that mother's love, while Asuka was ignored? That's the genius of Evangelion. Asuka's rage isn't just a personality trait, it's her desperate attempt to be seen, to matter, to prove she exists. When her abilities as a pilot falter, her identity crumbles because anger can't protect her anymore. Before I reveal the most misunderstood character's deadly sin, I couldn't really find one that applies to Rei. Get back to me in the comments if you can think of something. Shinji Ikari embodies sloth, but not the way most people think. Shinji's sloth isn't physical laziness, it's emotional withdrawal. His signature phrase, "I mustn't run away," isn't courage. It's his desperate fight against his deepest instinct to give up and disappear. Watch how often Shinji lies motionless after trauma, how he isolates himself with headphones, how he repeatedly tries to quit nerve. These aren't random character traits, they're manifestations of emotional sloth. His journey isn't about becoming brave, it's about finding the will to exist at all, even for a moment, even when existence means pain. Now, let's talk about Misato Katsuragi, a character whose sin goes far deeper than fan service. Misato embodies lust, not just sexual desire, but a desperate craving for sensation to escape emotional numbness. Watch how her apartment mirrors her internal state, chaotic, cluttered, filled with empty beer cans. This visual storytelling isn't accidental. Her living space reflects a woman using physical pleasures to drown out the trauma of watching her father die during second impact. Her relationship with Kaji isn't simply romantic, it's her grasping for connection through the only language she knows, physical intimacy. And in perhaps the most uncomfortable moment of this series, when she kisses Shinji before the final battle, we're seeing her tragic limitation. She can't motivate or connect without using her body. What makes Misato's character brilliant is that she knows she's broken. She recognizes her patterns, but can't escape them. Her lust isn't about pleasure, it's about feeling anything at all through the emotional scar tissue. Ritsuko Akagi's sin is the coldest and most calculating: envy. Most viewers see a brilliant scientist, but miss how her entire character is defined by living in shadows. Her mother's shadow, Rei's shadow, even her relationship with Gendo mirrors her mother's, a desperate attempt to matter to someone who sees her as a commodity. Pay attention to the visual framing when Ritsuko finally snaps and destroys Rei clones, the lighting, the echoing chamber, her expression, everything conveyed the moment when envy completely consumes rational thought. Her genius makes her envy even more painful. She's smart enough to understand exactly what she's feeling and why, but powerless to stop it. That's the cruel irony of her character. All that intelligence can save her from the most primal emotion of all, wanting what someone else has. Kaji Ryoji represents gluttony in its most dangerous form, not for food, but for knowledge. His watermelon garden isn't just a quirky character trait, it's symbolic of his nature, cultivating things hidden beneath the surface, things that take patience to grow. But unlike his plants, his hunger for truth can never be satisfied. Notice how Kaji moves through the series. He plays every side: NERV, SEAL, the Japanese government, consuming information regardless of the risk. His famous line about being too far in to turn back isn't just spy movie dialogue. It's the confession of a man whose appetite has sealed his fate. What makes his gluttony so compelling is that it's almost noble. He seeks truth in a world of lies. But like all things in Evangelion, it ultimately destroys him, proving that even the most justified appetite can be deadly when taken to extremes. Finally, we come to the coldest sin of all, the greed of Kill Lorenz. While Gendo wants to become God to reunite with his wife, Kill's motivation is pure greed for immortality and power. Look at him, more machine than human, clinging to life through technology, planning humanity's forced evolution not out of love or even twisted idealism, but fear of death. The Human Instrumentality Project isn't salvation, it's the ultimate act of cosmic greed. Kill doesn't want to share the world or accept its limits. He wants to possess everything, to erase individual suffering by erasing individuality itself. His visual design tells the whole story. Hidden behind visors, speaking through monolith, is humanity already fading away. He represents greed in its final form, not wanting more things, but wanting to become everything. What makes Evangelion a masterpiece isn't just that this character embodies sins, it's that their sins interact in a perfect storm of human frailty. Shinji's withdrawal fits Asuka's rage. Gendo's pride enables Ritsuko's envy. Misato's lust compounds Kaji's dangerous pursuit of knowledge. Evangelion doesn't condemn these characters, it simply shows real human beings trying to survive their own minds, their sins aren't evil, their coping mechanisms gone wrong. They're what happens when trauma meets power. That's why the series endures decades later. It's not about giant robots or religious symbolism. It's about the struggle to connect despite the darkness. Shinji Ikari, the only anime protagonist who sins harder than he fights. Pride? Absolutely. Shinji acts like he's the only one who can save the world until it's time to save the world. Then suddenly, it's everyone else's job to beg him back. Typical main character syndrome. Envy. Shinji stares at everyone else's happiness like he's window shopping for a new personality. He wants Asuka's confidence, Toji's simplicity, Misato's, let's just say, adulting skills. Don't let that sad face fool you. Shinji's wrath is apocalypse level. When he snaps, Tokyo 3 better have insurance. He's got a lifetime supply of anger issues. Thlos, the king of avoidance. Shinji's special move, procrastinating on saving the world by listening to his Walkman. Greed, not for cash, but for validation. If will you praise me if I pilot was a currency, Shinji would be a billionaire. Gluttony with self-pity. Shinji binges on isolation, soaking in sadness, like it's his favorite bath. Lust? Look, Shinji's puberty arc is infamous. You know the scene, we know the scene. The less said, the better. One face, 7 deadly sins, and yet somehow, he's the only one who still feels real. In Evangelion, something unexpected happens. Characters drowning in their own sins suddenly reach beyond themselves. Not to become heroes, but to simply be human. These moments are easy to miss, but they change everything. 7 characters embody the classical heavenly virtues, not as perfect saints, but as flawed humans who occasionally transcend their own damage. Let's start with Rei Ayanami, the embodiment of chastity in its truest form. Rei isn't just physically reserved, she represents emotional purity in a world drowning in desire and manipulation. While others are consumed by their wants, Rei exists almost outside of desire entirely. Pay close attention to her living space. Bare, minimal, unnatural, reflecting a character untouched by attachment or possession. What makes Rei's chastity profound is that it evolves from emptiness to choice. In the end of Evangelion, when she refuses Gendo's plan and follows Shinji's will instead, we see chastity transform, from absence to presence, from having no desires to making a pure choice for someone else's freedom. Her sacrifice isn't driven by lust for connection or fear of loss. It's an act of spiritual integrity that transcends physical existence entirely. Then, there's Kaji Ryochi, a character who might seem like an odd choice for temperance, until you look deeper, behind his flirtatious exterior and dangerous triple agent lifestyle. Kaji demonstrates balance better than any other adult. He walks impossible lines between nerve, Sile, and the Japanese government, between uncovering truth and maintaining safety. Notice how Kaji's watermelon garden visually represents his temperance, careful cultivation, patience, knowing exactly how much water and sunlight is needed. Not too much, not too little. Unlike Gendo or Sile, he doesn't want to remake the world. He just wants to understand it. And crucially, he knows when to stop, when to warn others away, when to accept the consequences of his actions. His temperance isn't perfection, it's the wisdom to acknowledge limits, even his own. Toji Suzuhara represents charity in its most authentic, grounded form. In a series filled with cosmic threats and psychological complexity, Toji's goodness is simply human. He doesn't pilot an Eva for glory or to save humanity. He does it for his sister. His charity isn't grand or philosophical, it's personal and real. Watch the scene where he punches Shinji, then later apologizes and becomes his friend. This isn't just character development, it's Hideaki Anno showing us how true charity involves integrity, forgiveness, and putting others before your pride. Even after losing everything, his limbs, his future, Toji never seeks revenge. In a world where most characters are consumed by their own pain, his selflessness stands strong. Misato Katsuragi embodies diligence in all its messy, complicated reality. Yes, she drinks too much. Yes, her apartment is chaos. But Misato never stops fighting. She never abandons her post or responsibilities, even when the burden crushes her. The visual contrast between her personal chaos and professional determination isn't accidental. It shows a woman compartmentalizing her trauma to function in a world that's falling apart. What makes Misato's diligence so powerful is that it isn't clean or pretty, it's desperate, flawed, and fueled by guilt. But unlike Shinji, who often runs away, Misato faces the apocalypse head-on, day after day, despite knowing how outmatched she is. Kaworu Nagisa represents patience that transcends human understanding. In just one episode, Kawulu creates more space for healing than any other character in the series. He doesn't push Shinji, he doesn't demand, he simply accepts and waits. The visual framing of Kawulu, often basking in light, positioned above or at a distance, shows a being who exists slightly outside of human urgency and anxiety. His patience culminates in the most devastating choice in the anime. He accepts his fate without struggle, choosing humanity's survival over his own existence. That's patience elevated to sacrifice. In a series where characters frantically try to control their futures, Kawulu's peaceful acceptance stands as a profound alternative. Hikari Araki demonstrates that sometimes the most heroic virtue is simply being kind. In a world of apocalyptic threats, Hikari's goodness seems small, making lunches, checking on classmates, maintaining normalcy. But that's precisely what makes her kindness meaningful. Watch how she cares for Asuka, even when Asuka pushes everyone away. Notice how she maintains order in the classroom, not from pride, but from genuine concern for others' well-being. Her kindness toward Toji isn't dramatic or complex. It's straightforward. It's basically just pure care for another person. In Evangelion's world of manipulation and hidden motives, Hikari's straightforward goodness is radical. She doesn't have a never. She can't fight angels. But in a series where connection is so desperately needed and so rarely achieved, her simple acts of kindness represent a path not taken by most characters. Finally, we come to perhaps the most surprising virtue of all, Shinji Ikari's humility. Unlike his father who wants to become God, Shinji questions whether he deserves to exist at all. This isn't just depression, it's the painful beginning of understanding his place in the world. The final scenes of the end of Evangelion show Shinji's humility transform from self-hatred to acceptance when given the power to reshape reality, to make everyone with him forever. He chooses instead to let people remain separate, flawed, but free. That's the ultimate act of humility, having the ultimate power and choosing not to use it. Recognizing that despite all his pain, he doesn't have the right to decide others' existence. What makes Evangelion truly masterful isn't just showing human sins, it's revealing how virtues can exist alongside them, sometimes in the same character, sometimes in quiet moments between catastrophes. Here's how Evangelion explores 7 distinct forms of love through its female characters. Level 1, detachment, Rei Ayanami. At the bottom, we have love that barely exists. Rei represents emotional emptiness. She'll follow orders, complete missions, even die for others, but none of it comes from genuine feeling. It's the complete absence of emotional investment, like trying to have a conversation with someone who's physically present but mentally checked out. You might mistake your compliance for care, but you'd be wrong. If love were a spectrum of colors, Rei would be transparent. Level 2, innocence, Hikari Araki. Here's where actual feelings begin. Hikari embodies teenage love in its most innocent form, the kind that makes you doodle someone's name in your notebook margins. Her feelings for Toji are uncomplicated and genuine. No manipulation, no hidden agendas, no psychological warfare, just honest affection expressed through small gestures and nervous glances. It's the kind of love that believes holding hands is earth-shattering. Simple, yes. Shallow, maybe. Level 3, possession. Asuka Langlesorio. Welcome to love as competition. Asuka doesn't just want to be loved. She needs to be the only one worthy of love. Every interaction becomes a performance where she must prove her superiority. Her feelings aren't gentle or patient. They're demanding, territorial, and exhausting. She'll shower you with attention one moment and tear you down the next, all while convincing herself it's passion. This is love filtered through insecurity, where vulnerability gets disguised as aggression. Level 4, passion, Misato Katsuragi. Now we hit love without safety nets. Misato approaches relationships like she's jumping off a cliff. No hesitation, no backup plan, just pure emotional freefall. She drinks away her pain and repeats the cycle. There's something beautiful about her willingness to feel everything so deeply, even when it hurts. This is love as an extreme sport, thrilling while it lasts, but guaranteed to leave scars. Level 5, Betrayal, Retsuko Akagi. Here love's become a prison you build for yourself. Retsuko knows she's being used, knows she deserves better, but stays anyway. Her intelligence makes it worse. She can analyze every way she's being hurt while being powerless to stop it. It's devotion with perfect vision, which makes it tragic. She sees the manipulation, understands the dynamics, and chooses suffering anyway. Love at this level is knowing you're drowning but refusing to swim to shore. Level 6, Devotion, Maya Ibuki. This is love as complete surrender of self. Maya doesn't just admire, she dissolves into the presence of her paramour. Every word becomes gospel, every gesture worth memorizing. It's beautiful in its purity and heartbreaking in its one-sidedness. Maya gives everything and asks for nothing, not even acknowledgement. She exists in the margins of someone else's story, content to be a footnote. This is love so selfless, it becomes self-erasure. Level 7, Transcendence, Shui Ikari. At the peak, love transcends individual desire and becomes cosmic. Yui's sacrifice isn't just for Shinji, it's for all of humanity's future. She literally becomes one with eternity to protect what she loves. This isn't romantic love or maternal instinct anymore. It's love as a universal principle, love that reshapes reality itself. She doesn't just care for her son, she becomes the foundation upon which his world can exist. This is love that breaks the boundaries between self and universe. From Rei's emotional vacuum to Yui's cosmic sacrifice, Evangelion shows us that love isn't one thing, it's a spectrum of human experience. Some forms are healthy, others destructive, but all are powerful enough to mirror our condition. Evangelion sold us angels, mecha, and conspiracies about the end of the world. Metal Gear Solid 2 sold us stealth, espionage, and the long-awaited return of Snake. But none of it was real. Not really. Every trailer, every poster, every demo whispered what we wanted to hear, and we believed them. Hype surged, Rei Ayanami became a cultural icon, Snake stole the show at E3. Anno wasn't just making a mecha anime, he was dissecting the people who needed mecha anime to feel whole. Kojima wasn't just making an action game, he was probing the minds of players who blurred the lines between simulation and reality. They built the trap, we tripped the wire. Shinji is Raiden, reluctant heroes thrown into battles they didn't choose. Shinji pilots the Eva because his father needs him to. Raiden infiltrates Big Shell because the Patriots need a new Snake. Both believe they're part of something bigger. Both learn their pawns, substitutes. Shinji discovers he's just one in a line of broken child pilots. Raiden learns that memories are fabricated, his identity scripted. They don't save the world, they start to question whether they were ever meant to. Rei is the Patriot's AI. She looks human, but she's not. She's a manufactured vessel designed to initiate human instrumentality, an event meant to erase individuality by merging all minds into one. The Patriot's AI pretends to safeguard truth. In reality, it engineers confusion and control. Both promise connection, both deliver subjugation. Not salvation, but surveillance dressed up as meaning. Asuka is Solidus Snake, the rival, the overachiever, desperate to matter. Solidus is the rebel idealist, desperate to free a nation, but both are pawns, designed by the very systems they claim to resist. Angry, tragic, disposable. Kaworu is cyborg ninja. They arrive late, they offer understanding, they speak with empathy. Kaworu connects with Shinji only to betray him. Cyborg Ninja helps Raiden understand the truth. Their connection is real, but it ends in manipulation. Misato is Colonel Campbell and Rose. Misato seems like a caring guardian, but she's still following Nerve's script. The Colonel guides Raiden until he glitches, repeats nonsense, becoming incoherent. Rose seems like Raiden's emotional anchor, but she's spying on him, relaying data to the Patriots. They all start as trusted voices,
They all become instruments of control. Gendo is the original patriots, not the AI, the people. Zero, Sigint, paramedic. The old man behind the curtain. Gendo abandoned his son but shaped every moment of his life. The patriots built the surveillance state, then disappeared into it. These are father figures who chose power over presence, puppeteers who erase themselves from the stage. Letsuko is Otacon, the enabler, the scientist. Letsuko knows nerves, true goals, but doesn't walk away. Otacon understands the Patriots' reach, but keeps helping. They are torn between belief and betrayal, and in the end, they help the machine keep spinning. A generation raised on screens understood exactly what Shinji felt. Disconnection, identity collapse, performance as survival. Getting the robot became shortened for being forced to function inside systems you can escape. Evangelion and Metal Gear Solid 2 were never about the plot. They were about us, about the audience, about what happens when we need fiction to keep our realities intact, and what happens when that fiction turns on us.
Do you remember when you first discovered anime and JRPGs that challenged your understanding of the human psyche? When you thought they were just entertaining stories? When you thought it would just be straightforward to understand their deeper meanings? When you thought it would only just take a casual viewing to grasp everything? And here you are, still stuck with the same questions about what Evangelion and Persona 3 are really trying to tell us. If you keep trying to understand them as just stories about teenagers fighting monsters, then you're just going to get the same surface level interpretation as you've always have gotten. There's only one way out. Examining these works through the lens of Carl Jung's psychology, where we can finally understand these characters as people on profound journeys of self-discovery, and all battles mirror their internal struggles. In Evangelion, Shinji feels drawn to Rei not just because she's mysterious, but because she represents a part of himself he's afraid to confront, his own deep emotions, gentleness, and longing for acceptance. Rei isn't merely a dream girlfriend, she's a mirror of Shinji's own soul. Similarly in Persona 3, Makoto Yuki, the quiet protagonist, struggles to open up. His growing connection with Yukari isn't just romance. It's about learning to express feelings is hidden behind a tough, distant exterior. Through Yukari, he learns to trust, hope, and care. In Jungian psychology, this represents the anima, the hidden feminine side of a man's psyche. Facing it means becoming more complete, less afraid of your own heart. Both Shinji and Makoto are confronting this inner part of themselves. If you ever felt torn between staying tough and being honest about your fears, you've experienced this same inner struggle. Gendo Ikari refuses to face his grief over losing Yui. Instead of healing, he builds walls, hurts others, and tries to control everything. His refusal to process his pain leads to destruction. This mirrors Takaya in Persona 3, who was leader of Strega, embraces death instead of fighting for life. Like Gendo, Takaya escapes pain by pulling others into despair. This illustrates what Jung called failed individuation, when you refuse to deal with your own inner pain. This avoidance creates destruction, both within yourself and in the world around you. If you've ever bottled up emotions until they made everything worse, you've witnessed the danger of not confronting your pain. Asuka and Shinji are constantly at odds, yet drawn to each other. Deep down, they recognize part of themselves they dislike. Asuka hides her need to be loved under toughness, while Shinji conceals his anger beneath quietness. Their connection is messy, because real intimacy means facing the parts of themselves they fear the most. In Persona 3, we see this with Junpei and Chidori. Junpei is outwardly a joker, inwardly insecure. Chidori appears cold and distant, but is secretly lonely. When they connect, their relationship becomes raw and vulnerable, much like Asuka and Shinji's. Jung would call this confrontation with the shadow, those hidden, darker aspects of ourselves that we typically avoid. True connection happens when we face these parts, even when we see them in others. If someone has ever frustrated you because they reminded you of your own weaknesses, you've experienced the shadow at play. Misato appears tough externally, but internally carries old wounds, guilt about the father, fear of abandonment. Despite her pain, she tries to help Shinji and others. Similarly, Mitsuru is a collected leader, haunted by her family's past mistakes. She guides her friends, not because she's flawless, but because she understands pain. This embodies Jung's concept of the wounded healer. Sometimes, the best guides are those who have experienced their own suffering. If you've ever helped a friend through difficulty while dealing with your own problems, you've embodied this archetype. Instrumentality in Evangelion represents everyone merging into one being, eliminating loneliness, but also individuality. Shinji ultimately rejects this, realizing that pain, loneliness, and separation are part of being human. In Persona 3, the final battle against Nyx confronts death, separation, and fear, but choosing to live and connect anyway. SEES doesn't erase their individuality. They accept that joy and sadness coexist in life. Jung would see this as embracing both individuality and connection. Maturity comes from accepting that you need others while remaining true to yourself. If you've ever been tempted to hide your identity just to fit in, you face this same choice that defines both these profound stories. Both Evangelion and Persona 3 show us that love, friendship, and even fighting monsters aren't about becoming perfect. They're about facing the messy, beautiful, and terrifying truth of who we really are. In both stories, the characters' relationships aren't just about romance, that they're about deep psychological and emotional growth. These relationships show us that the ultimate task of life is to become conscious of who we truly are, including all the parts we don't like or understand. This is the journey of individuation, the process of becoming the whole person we are meant to be. What happens when love outlives the person it was meant for? When the lines between memory and obsession blur? When a man decides that reality itself should bend to his will, rather than accept what is lost? Two men standing at the edge of their worlds, two husbands who lost the woman they loved, and two stories that might have defined how you understood grief as you grew up. Gendo Ikari and James Sunderland became the perfect mirrors of our own struggles with loss, guilt, and the desperate need to rewrite our pasts. Let's start with James Sunderland. If you played Silent Hill 2 back in 2001, maybe on your PlayStation 2, in a dark bedroom, with the volume low so your parents wouldn't hear, you remember him well. The man who drives to a foggy resort town after receiving a letter from his wife Mary.
I got a letter. The name on the envelope said Mary. My wife's name.
Opening lines that set up one of gaming's most profound psychological journeys. James isn't a typical horror protagonist. He's not a cop. He's just a man broken by loss, wandering into a nightmare. What made Silent Hill 2 revolutionary wasn't its monster or jump scares. It was how the town itself became a manifestation of James' psyche. Every creator he faces, every location he visits, every character he meets, they're all reflections of guilt, his desires, his failed attempts to process grief. Remember Pyramid Head, that hulking helmeted executioner. He wasn't just a cool monster design that would later become the franchise's mascot. He was James' own guilt, made flesh. His desire for punishment, his need for someone to judge him for what he'd done. This idea that the external world could be shaped by internal trauma wasn't just innovative for horror games. Silent Hill 2 suggested that our worst enemies were the parts of ourselves we couldn't face. Now, let's shift to Gendo Ikari. If you discovered Evangelion during its original run or on True Adult Swim broadcasts in the early 2000s, Gendo presented a different kind of horror. Not the lost soul wandering through fog, but the calculating mastermind. Like James, Gendo lost his wife, Yui Ikari, absorbed into Evangelion Unit 1 during a contact experiment, leaving behind a husband and young son. But while James descended into denial and delusion, Gendo ascended into power and control. He took command of NERV, he manipulated governments, children, and the very future of humanity, all for one purpose: to be reunited with Yui, regardless of the cost. This wasn't grief as personal nightmare, this was grief as world-ending obsession. What makes these characters so fascinating to compare is how their environments reflect their psychology. Silent Hill transforms itself for James, becoming a manifestation of his guilty conscience. The foggy streets, the abandoned apartments, the nightmarish hospital, all of it shapes itself around this specific trauma. The town isn't just haunted, it's actively participating in James' reckoning. Every monster was meaningful, every location symbolic. Pyramidhead represented James' desire for punishment. The mannequins with their twisted female forms reflected his repressed sexuality and objectification of women. Abstract Daddy confronted him with the horrors of abuse. It suggested that our inner demons could take physical form. Evangelion does something eerily similar with its angels. The angels function much like Silent Hill's monsters. They are psychological as much as physical challenges. Each angel forces the pilots to confront different aspects of their humanity and trauma. And at the center of it all is Nerve Headquarters, Gendo's domain. The massive underground complex, with its layers of security and secrecy, mirrors Gendo's own compartmentalized emotions. The Evangelion units themselves, biological machines containing the souls of mothers, are perfect metaphors for how both James and Gendo refuse to let go. They keep the dead alive in monstrous forms rather than accept their loss. For a generation coming of age in the shadow of 9/11, these stories resonated in ways their creators might never have anticipated. They gave us a vocabulary for understanding how personal pain could reshape entire worlds. The most fascinating connections between these stories emerge when we map their monsters and metaphors directly onto each other. The lying figure with its straitjacket body mirrors Sakiel, the first angel we see in Evangelion. Both are introductory traits that set the tone. Disorienting, unnerving, neither fully explained. They exist to shake the protagonist out of complacency and into a new, more dangerous reality. Pyramidhead in Silent Hill 2 functions remarkably like Evangelion's Angel Zeruel. Remember that moment when Pyramidhead takes care of the two mannequins, or when Zeruel decimates Unit 0 and Unit 2 without hesitation? Both represent raw, inescapable violence. Pyramidhead is James' executioner, relentless and unstoppable. Zeruel is the brute force angel, tearing through Nerve's defenses to force a confrontation. Abstract Daddy parallels Arael, the angel of light. Abstract Daddy represents sexual trauma in Silent Hill's narrative. Arael psychically invades Asuka's mind, exposing her deepest wounds. Both monsters force characters to relieve pain they desperately want to forget. Both men are just mourning their wives. They are refusing to accept a world without them, and both are willing to distort reality itself rather than face their loss. For James, this means creating a psychological hell where he can be punished and potentially redeemed. For Gendo, it means initiating the Human Instrumentality Project. In an era before mental health was openly discussed, these stories gave us a vocabulary for understanding how grief could transform a person. What makes both Silent Hill 2 and Evangelion enduring classics isn't just their innovative storytelling or memorable imagery, it's how they use horror and science fiction to explore deeply human experiences. Both Silent Hill 2 and Evangelion ultimately ask the same devastating question: what happens when grief becomes obsession, when love becomes possession?
Picture this. It's Friday night, you're on your couch with snacks. You're faced with that eternal dilemma. Do you replay that Halo campaign you've beaten 7 times, or rewatch Evangelion to finally get it? You've spent countless evenings switching between these two cultural staples, never fully realizing how similar they actually are. What if I told you that Halo isn't just another sci-fi FPS, but actually the Evangelion of video games? Both reshape their art category, both lean heavily into religious symbolism, and both continue to confuse and captivate fans decades after their release. This deep dive into the parallel universes of Halo and Evangelion reveals why Master Chief and Ikari Shinji are basically cosmic cousins. Once you see these connections, you'll never look at either franchise the same way again. Let's start with the obvious. Both Halo and Evangelion are absolutely drowning in religious imagery. Just as Evangelion bombard viewers with crosses, Kabbalah references, and biblical allusions, Halo's entire universe revolves around religious concepts. The name Halo itself refers to the divine rings floating in space. Much like the holy auras depicted around sacred figures in religious art, the Covenant, a direct reference to biblical agreements between God and humanity, worship the Forerunners as gods. The flood represents divine punishment, mirroring biblical catastrophes. Even deeper, the mantle of responsibility in Halo lore functions as a quasi-religious doctrine that guided the Forerunners, similar to how Sile operates with their Dead Sea Scrolls prophecies in Evangelion. Both franchises present knowledge as both salvation and potential doom. The Didact and the Librarian parallel, Adam and Lilith. And just as Evangelion's angels were named after divine messengers in religious texts, the Prometheans in Halo 4 represent fallen warriors transformed into guardians of a corrupted paradise. Both franchises use religious imagery to elevate their sci-fi narratives into something that feels ancient and mythological. Just as Evangelion creator Hideaki Anno used Christian symbolism to give his anime philosophical depth, Halo developers created a universe where humanity's fate is tied to ancient cosmic powers and divine artifacts. Consider our protagonists: Master Chief, a genetically enhanced super soldier in power armor, and Shinji Ikari, a reluctant teen pilot of a biomechanical Evangelion unit. Both characters are essentially humans encased in powerful technological shells that connect to their nervous system. The parallels go deeper. Both characters were taken from normal life at a young age and molded into weapons by shadow military organizations. Both struggle with their humanity while bearing the responsibility of saving mankind. Cortana's relationship with Master Chief mirrors Rei Ayanami's connection to Shinji, an artificial intelligence, a clone, with mysterious origins who forms a deep bond with the protagonist. Both relationships evolve from professional to deeply personal, challenging the isolated hero's emotional barriers. What's more, both Chief and Shinji face personal crises about their identities. Both heroes learn they've been manipulated by father figures who value them primarily as weapons. When you play as Master Chief destroying the Covenant or watch Shinji battle angels, you're experiencing the same emotional core. This fusion of man and machine is central to both narratives, solidifying Halo's position as the Evangelion of the gaming world, a property that transcended its medium to become a cultural phenomenon that continues to inspire passionate analysis and devotion years after its debut. If you've spotted other ways Halo serves as gaming's answer to Evangelion, feel free to engage in the comments. This expose goes to show that whether you're piloting an Eva or wearing Mjolnir armor, the real battle is always with yourself. No mechs, no monsters, just trauma, manipulation, and the crushing moment you realize you were never in control. Both stories begin the same way, with a crash. A plane falling from the sky, dropping Jack into the black, icy Atlantic, alone, confused, gasping for air. A boy, Shinji, dropped into a world where every adult is missing or broken, tossed straight into war. You think you're making choices, you think you're in control, but that illusion doesn't last. Jack, like Shinji, was never born free. He was manufactured, written, scripted.
Would you kindly?
Isn't a request, it's a command, burned into his bones from the moment the game begins. Everything you do, every so-called choice, is obedience. You're a puppet, not a player. Jack and Shinji, just enough human to feel guilt, just fragile enough to break. Both are pawns, forced into violence by their fathers. Andrew Ryan is Gendo Ikari, both convinced their pain is purpose, but so obsessed with their control they destroy the thing they love. And when Ryan forces Jack to kill him, whispering,
"A man chooses, a slave obeys,"
it isn't a triumphant moment. It's the mask falling off the system, a confession that you were never really free. Fontaine is Sile, the voice in your ear, the power in the shadows, manipulating you with hope, with resentment, with empty promises. Control is the real villain here,
Not monsters, not angels, not splicers, but systems that convince you that you chose this fate. The little sisters are Rey, engineered, erased, broken into tools. They're supposed to be background until they cry or flinch or beg, reminding you there's a real soul somewhere behind those empty eyes. The big daddies, the Evangelions. Tragic, hulking, born to protect, not out of love, but out of duty. When you kill one and a little sister sobs, it's not just game mechanics, it's grief, written right into the loop. Dr. Tenenbaum is Ritsuko, an architect of the nightmare, now desperate for redemption. Neither ever truly saved the day, they just show us what broken salvation looks like. Raptor is Tokyo 3, a city built on lies and pride, doomed to drown, one underwater, one under siege, both cages pretending to be home. Adam is Adam. A miracle, a curse, the promise of transformation injected, merge with it. That second impact in Evangelion. It's the plane crash in BioShock. Random, meaningless, until it isn't. You're not a survivor, you're a weapon, finally activated. Every character fits a role, damaged, loyal, a ghost, or a pawn. But the real question is, who are you when nobody is telling you what to do? When Jack hears,
Would you kindly?
And realizes it controlled everything, it's Shinji staring at his blood-stained hands, realizing they were only used to hurt. These aren't stories about winning, they're about what's left or the illusion of choice is shattered. In the end, Shinji gets to decide who comes back. Jack decides what he'll become. Monster, savior, there's no closer, just the raw ugly truth about who used them and who they were meant to be. BioShock is Evangelion stripped of ideology, drowning in its own trauma. And at the center, you, a broken kid, red, glowing for meaning, after everything they made you do. Remember the first time you met her? That cold mechanical voice echoing through the empty test chambers?
Hello, and again, welcome to the Aperture Science Computer-Aided Enrichment Center.
GLaDOS. By the end of this video, you'll never look at that passive-aggressive AI the same way again. The AI that defined a generation of gaming. The voice that followed you through pristine white corridors, that promised you cake, that made you laugh, and the journey she put you through. It has more in common with the psychological devastation of Evangelion than anyone has ever acknowledged. On the surface, Portal and Evangelion couldn't seem more different. One's a sterile, minimalist puzzle game about physics and momentum, released in 2007 when many of us were just entering high school or starting college. The other, a chaotic anime about teenage trauma and apocalyptic weaponry, that hit Western shores in the late 90s and early 2000s, finding its way onto Adult Swim into the hands of night owl teenagers looking for something deeper than Dragon Ball Z. Blood-soaked battles, teens forced into piloting, but beneath these surface differences lies a structural symmetry that's almost eerie. Think back to how you felt playing Portal for the first time. That growing unease at GLaDOS's commands became more unhinged. The dawning realization that something was deeply wrong with this facility, with this voice following your every move. Now recall watching Evangelion, perhaps on a worn-out DVD or a fuzzy TV broadcast. The way the angel appeared, incomprehensible, geometric. The way each encounter left Shinji more broken than before. Both experiences share something crucial: containment. Both Portal and Evangelion trap emotionally stunted protagonists inside mechanical systems designed to expose their deepest weaknesses. Shell, silent, determined, trapped in endless test chambers with no context, no explanation. Just the promise that success leads to more tests, more chambers, more GLaDOS. Shinji Ikari, abandoned, desperate for approval, forced into the entry plug of Unit 1 by a father who can barely look at him. Remember how it felt? The sensation that the world was tasting you constantly, that Eidos had designed systems you couldn't possibly understand, but were expected to navigate. That's what made these stories resonate so powerfully with us as teenagers and young adults. They externalized the very real feeling that someone somewhere was watching us fail, measuring our responses, cataloging our breakdowns. GLaDOS and the Angels aren't just antagonists. They're the embodiment of systems that don't care about your humanity, only your performance.
The Enrichment Center reminds you that the weighted companion cube cannot speak. In the event that the weighted companion cube does speak, the Enrichment Center urges you to disregard its advice.
Sounds familiar? It should. Because it's the same cold assessment Nerve gives Shinji. Your job is to pilot the Evangelion, nothing more. Let's break down GLaDOS, literally, because she isn't just a standalone character, she's a mosaic, a synthesis of several angels rolled into one elegant, sociopathic woman-shaped algorithm. Remember Arael, the angel of light that never physically touched Asuka but instead pierced her mind from orbit, broadcasting raw memory and trauma directly into her consciousness? GLaDOS does the same. She cuts shell with voice alone. Not turrets, not deadly flaws, but with clinical, surgical, psychological warfare.
You euthanized your faithful companion cube more quickly than any test subject on record. Congratulations.
She taunts your irrelevance, questions your worth, reminds you of your abandonment.
It says so right here in your personnel file. Unlikable, liked by no one. A bitter, unlikable loner whose passing shall not be mourned.
GLaDOS forces Shell to confront her status as a test subject. Disposable, replaceable, or consider Leliel, the angel that appeared as a black and white shadow, a void between dimensions. It consumed Shinji's Evangelion unit and trapped him in a dreamlike abyss where he was forced into a monologue with himself, isolated and dissolving. GLaDOS builds chambers with no exit, puzzles with no solution. She locks you into sterile loops where your only companion is her voice and your own determination. You are both the lab rat and the observer. Remember that moment when you finally realized that Portal wasn't going to let you escape? The sudden understanding that the system had never intended to release you? That's pure Evangelion. The realization that the structures you trusted are designed to use you completely. What makes this comparison truly devastating is how both GLaDOS and the Angels operate through three distinct emotional frequencies, each one designed to break down different aspects of your psyche. First, black comedy. GLaDOS is funny, that's the problem. She talks about your death like it's an office memo.
Please be advised that a noticeable taste of blood is not part of any test protocol, but is an unintended side effect of the Aperture Science Material Emancipation Grill.
Laughter was the only appropriate response to such casual cruelty. Evangelion does the same. Misato's alcoholism, Gendo's absentee parenting, all wrapped in dry, bitter dialogue that makes you chuckle before you realize what you're laughing at. You were supposed to notice how numb you'd become. Second, existential dread. Shell is voiceless, GLaDOS talks at Shell, never with her. Shinji pours his heart out into a void that never responds. Neither truly understands the system they trapped in. They are surrounded by machinery, literal and psychological, that strips them of autonomy. And the worst part, you keep going, you keep solving, you keep piloting. Because the alternative is silence, and silence is death. Third, surreal absurdity. Portal physics, companion cubes, cake, Evangelion's LCL, giant ghostly ray, the Human Instrumentality Project. These worlds operate by their own internal logic, unfamiliar, dreamlike, mechanical. They don't explain themselves. They seduce you into accepting meaninglessness as fact. Remember the first time you saw the scroll messages on Portal's walls? Or when Evangelion's final episodes abandoned conventional animation for sketches, still frames, and psychological breakdowns? These weren't just artistic choices. They were ruptures in reality itself. That's where the fourth wall cracked just enough to let you know that something wasn't right. Not just in the story, but in the medium itself. For anyone who felt the weight of expectations, anyone who tried to create something meaningful in a world that seemed increasingly artificial, these parallels hit different. Because both Portal and Evangelion are ultimately about artistic annihilation. GLaDOS is the inner critic, elegant, relentless, cruel,
the voice in your head that says this isn't good enough. Remember college projects that never felt finished, job applications that never felt perfect, relationships where you couldn't quite express what you needed. GLaDOS was there in your head, judging. The angels are metaphors for all the things that block creativity and authentic existence. Fear of connection, imposter syndrome, parental pressure, ego death. They are what it feels like to dare to make something in a world that doesn't care if you succeed. Or worse, punishes you when you do. This is why these experiences from our formative years, from those late nights with controllers in hand or eyes glued to Adult Swim, still resonate so deeply. They weren't just entertainment, they were reflection of our own internal struggles, externalized in neon and binary code. So maybe GLaDOS is an angel, not a holy one, not a savior, but a catalyst. She's not there to kill Shell, she's there to break her open, to hollow out everything she thought she was, to turn the test chamber into a mirror. And Shinji, he doesn't save the world, he barely saves himself. Because the stories aren't about triumph, they're about survival in systems that cannot be won, and even that is temporary. For a generation raised on participation trophies and standardized tests, on helicopter parenting and early internet isolation, these ambiguous endings felt more honest than any triumphant boss defeat or a saved princess. And if you're one of the lucky ones who hasn't experienced either, what are you waiting for?
How did an anime from the 90s predict the future of UI design? Evangelion presents futuristic screens that would look strangely familiar to anyone using an Apple device today. Let's find out how Evangelion predicted design choices that Apple made famous. First, let's look at minimalism. In Evangelion, Nerve's interfaces remove unnecessary elements using clean, black backgrounds with essential information displayed. Nothing decorative, just functional design. Now, look at Apple's evolution. The early iPod simple interface was a step in the right direction, but the link between Evangelion and Apple became clear in 2013 when Apple decided on a more minimal approach. Both Evangelion and Apple recognized that removing the excess creates more effective communication. It is the similar use of negative space, thin lines, and content focus. Evangelion was doing this in 1995, nearly 2 decades before Apple's famous redesign. The second parallel is typography as a core design element. Evangelion didn't just use text to present information, it made typography central to the visual experience. The show's fonts created a common visual language with Japanese, English, and German text. Similarly, Apple invested heavily in typography, eventually creating the San Francisco font family. Both understood that well-presented text creates identity, atmosphere. Look at how both use typographic hierarchy to establish importance and create visual interest. The similarities are striking despite being created decades apart. The third parallel is strategic use of high contrast color. Evangelion uses color with a purpose. Emergency situations feature red on black. Normal operations have their distinct color profiles. Color isn't decorative, it communicates system status instantly. Apple follows this same approach. Their professional application adopted dark backgrounds early on. The introduction of dark mode created environments remarkably similar to Evangelion's common screen. Limited color palettes with specific meanings. Red for warnings, green for progress. Application of colors against dark backgrounds creates systems that feel both modern and functional, whether in fictional 2015 or real-world interfaces today. What makes these parallels fascinating is noticing that effective design principles transcend their context. Evangelion's teams created fictional interfaces focusing on what would look advanced and functional. Good design follows universal principles of human perception. Clear hierarchy, restraint, and understanding how visual elements guide attention are mandatory.
Why should we care about what the characters eat? Because in Evangelion, food is a confession. While most analyses focus on the symbolism and religious imagery, we are going to explore something more fundamental. How food becomes the subtle language of trauma, connection, identity in this landmark anime.
Evangelion's characters exist in a state of perpetual crisis. In this context, their relationship with food takes on extraordinary significance. Each character's eating habits form an emotional fingerprint. What they eat reveals their trauma. How they eat shows their capacity for connection. Who they eat with demonstrates their boundaries. A refrigerator reveals more about a person than their spoken words ever could. We see the extraordinary pain of these characters, their desperate attempts at normalcy, and the fundamental human needs for nourishment that goes beyond calories. When you understand what these characters eat, you see their true emotion laid bare, the hunger that goes far beyond physical nourishment, revealing the empty spaces inside them that nothing, not even saving the world, can fill. Misato Katsuragi's fridge is perhaps the most psychologically revealing in anime story. Beer, more beer, instant meals, a feast of self-destruction. This isn't laziness, it's survival. After witnessing Second Impact as a child, trauma made her speechless for years. Her chaotic diet is the only control she has over the world. Each beer she opens isn't celebration, it's relief, a rebellion against the order of nerve. Her meal requires minimal effort, perfect for someone terrified of deeper connections. Even her rare attempts at cooking are disasters, not because she's incapable, but because nurturing others demands a vulnerability she cannot afford. Shinji's role as the household cook exposes this void, inverting traditional parental roles and showing how broken their surrogate family truly is. If Misato's relationship with food is defined by excess, Rei Ayanami's is defined by absence. Her refrigerator contains nothing but a half-empty pot of water. Her existence is stripped to its essentials. This makes the ramen scene profoundly significant. When Misato chooses a place with vegetarian options for Rei, we witness a revolutionary moment. Someone is finally considering her needs. While Rei barely eats and Misato lives on beer, Asuka Langley-Soryu expresses herself through perfectionism. To accept nourishment from another is to admit dependency, something Asuka cannot afford without shattering her carefully constructed self-image. Shinji's relationship with food stands apart. Unlike the others, he doesn't use food to self-destruct, deny himself, or prove anything. Instead, cooking becomes his refuge. In the kitchen, he is methodical, focused, at peace. Here, he is not hesitant or afraid, unlike piloting Unit 1, where he is paralyzed by fear. Cooking gives him purpose and control. His meals are quiet expressions of care. Every neatly arranged plate speaks the words he cannot. Apology, gratitude, connection. Not all food relationships in Evangelion are broken. Class representative Hikari Oraki offers a rare example of healthy emotional expression through food. Her bento for Toji are straightforward, traditional, affectionate, evolving as her feelings grow. They don't demand validation, they simply are. A quiet, honest offering of care. Through beer cans and empty fridges, perfect meals and loving bento, Evangelion tells a story about human connections that dialogue never could. We all are hungry, not just for food, but for understanding, for love, for a place to belong. You remember the hospital scene. You don't need a timestamp. You don't need a frame. You just know. The silence, the stillness, the shame. It's not just the most uncomfortable moment in anime history. It's the most human. This scene has been dissected, memed, censored, and buried. But almost no one talks about why it exists. It wasn't just shock value. It was Hideaki Anno throwing a brick through the window of anime conventions and making you sit in the broken glass. This video isn't here to justify it. It's here to show you why it matters, why you felt sick, why Shinji's breakdown isn't a mistake. It's the entire point. Let's go deeper than the surface. Deeper than the scene. This is Evangelion through the lens of psychology, narrative collapse, and the unbearable pressure to exist. Episode 24 ends with Kaworu's death. It wasn't just another loss, it was the final emotional thread Shinji was clinging to. When End of Evangelion begins, Shinji is already broken.
not dramatic broken, not anime protagonist broken. They died, no will to live broken. And then he finds Asuka. The hospital room is silent. There is no soundtrack, no moral compass, no emotional guidance. By yourself, with him, chilling. Asuka lies comatose. The one person who mirrored his pain, who fought him, rejected him. Shinji's act, horrific, shameful, immediate, is not portrayed with titillation. It is immediate trauma. The sound of his breath, the silence afterward, his whispered line is not an excuse. It's a confession. This is the manifestation of absolute emotional disconnection. Shinji doesn't know how to ask for love, so he acts in violence. Not outwardly, inwardly. Ano didn't want you to sympathize. He wanted you to feel implicated. He wanted to punish the viewer for ever turning Evangelion into escapism, because that's what it became. The fans who idolized Rei, who made Asuka a wife, who loved the pain because it was fiction. Ano said, you want realism? Here it is. You want to project yourself onto Shinji? It's going to cost you. This wasn't fan service. It was fan confrontation. Hideaki Anno was at war with his audience. After death and rebirth, after the backlash, after the hate mail he broke, End of Evangelion was this message in a bottle, lit on fire and thrown into the sea. This scene is that fire. It tells the truth about what happens when we confuse characters for therapy, stories for salvation. Evangelion was never about cool robots. It was about depression, apathy, ego collapse. And this scene, it burned away the last illusion. You were supposed to feel disgusted. You were supposed to ask yourself, why? And if you looked away, Anno won. Because Evangelion was never about comfort. It was a mirror, a challenge, a dare. The hospital scene is still debated because it's real in a way that animation rarely allows itself to be. It's not beautiful, it's not elegant, but it's true. And that's why we still talk about it. Because sometimes the most human stories are the hardest ones to look at. Evangelion wasn't made to be loved, it was made to be understood. But understanding hurts. Because understanding means admitting the part of you that was Shinji. Not the pilot, not the chosen one, the kid who gave up, the kid who wanted someone to tell him he mattered and never did. The hospital scene is not about lust, it's about control, or the illusion of it. Shinji touches Asuka not because he wants her, but because he wants something to respond to him, even passively, even unconsciously, because every other door has closed. This isn't sex, it's a scream. It's the ugliest kind of intimacy, one-sided, unreciprocated, and fully aware of its wrongness. It's not about desire, it's about desperation. And Anno makes you feel that, frame by frame. There's no romantic haze, no visual euphemism, just sterile light, unmoving shadows, and the weight of a silence that accuses you as much as him. Because Evangelion was always self-aware. It knew its audience, knew what they wanted, and it said, you came here for catharsis? You came to be understood? Then face this. Face the ugliest part of being human. The part that collapses under loneliness and chooses violation of their vulnerability. Anno watched fans reduce his trauma to gifts. He watched a show about depression turn into merchandise. He saw Shinji become a joke, Asuka become a pin-up, Rei become a brand. And they asked, is this what you took from it? So he made End of Evangelion, not to continue the story, but to destroy the fantasy, to make sure no one could pretend anymore. Because the real apocalypse wasn't the angels. It was the moment Shinji touched Asuka, and the moment you realized you couldn't stop him. That was the impact.
That was the end. Evangelion doesn't care if you like it. It dares you to look anyway. And if you do, you'll see something terrible. Not just in Shinji, not just in the scene, but in yourself. 2 days ago, I nearly lost access to something that had changed my entire perspective on design 10 years ago. In a vast landscape of internet creativity, a 2015 forgotten Tumblr collection nearly vanished forever. What you're about to see isn't just digital art, it's a rescue mission. The Fragrant Iris, 19th century, Guillaume Seignac. Seignac's Syrinx painting is fractured by Eva Unit 1's presence. This illustrates the violent clash between organic fragility and mechanical supremacy. Archangel San Gabriel, 18th century, José Camarón Bonanat. Bonanat's San Gabriel represents Unit 1's berserker awakening. The Renaissance figure's raised hand appears to signal the monstrous transformation. The clash between calm religious imagery and Evangelion's raw violence embodies the theme of hidden, uncontrollable forces. The Young Shepherdess, 1885, William Adolphe Bougreau. Bougreau's peaceful shepherdess is reimagined with Unit Zero's head. This creates a contrast between pastoral serenity and futuristic resilience. The soft landscape and traditional attire collide with Evangelion's mechanical intensity. The shepherdess turns into a symbol of endurance. Archangel Gabriel, 1851, Paul-Émile Jacobs. Paul-Émile Jacobs' Archangel Gabriel transforms into Leliel, the 12th angel. The divine messenger now symbolizes conflict as Unit 1 struggles to escape Leliel. The serene classical pose contrasts with spherical horror, reinterpreting the notion of an angel. Sacred Heart of Jesus with Saint Ignatius of Loyola and Saint Luis Gonzaga. 1770, José de Páez. A classical religious painting infused with Evangelion's theme mirrors Misato's sacrifice. Angelic figures and sacred symbols frame a moment of intense human emotion, bridging traditional spirituality with contemporary storytelling. Our Lady of Sorrows, El Viso del Alcor, Seville, Spain. A solemn religious figure overlaid with Shinji's pained expression unites historical depiction of suffering with modern psychological fragility. Shinji's golden frame presence suggests an intersection of divinity and human vulnerability. The Suicide of Kaito, 1692, Johann Michael Rothmer. A painting of physical agony, rendered in deep red, merges with Unit 2's brutal defeat. Mechanical destruction blends with organic suffering. The fusion of classical trauma and technological violence creates a haunting reflection on sacrifice. Saint Sebastian, 1623, Gerrit van Honthorst. The Saint Sebastian martyrdom scene is juxtaposed with Unit 2's downfall. This draws parallel between classical suffering and Evangelion's existential struggles. The Eva Unit 2's isolation mirrors the Saint's pain, suggesting resilience amid destruction. Capilla del Hospital del Amor de Dios, 1796, Anonymous. A religious iconography-rich piece is fractured by Ritsuko's betrayal, blending sacred visual with psychological turmoil. The ornate frame highlights the emotional weight of our technological and personal downfall. Portrait of Grand Duchess Elizabeth Feodorovna, 1885, Karl Rudolfsson. An elegant woman in a classical portrait finds her serene world disrupted by an evasive Gendo disturbingly fusing with Rei. The contrast between historical refinement and undesired contact underscores a theme of transformation. Christ Crucified, 1632, Diego Velázquez. A crucifixion scene overlays Lilith's liberation, shifting from religious sacrifice to cosmic transcendence. The visual suggests that breaking bound marks a moment of radical change. Woman kills injured man, 1994. Odd Nerdrum, a dynamic human figure, disrupted by an Evangelion transformation, visualizes Lilith's metamorphosis into Rei. Traditional human form dissolves into a surreal, evolving identity. Deposizione, 2010, Roberto Ferri. A dramatic classical figure in red merges with an Eva unit, capturing the tension between organic vulnerability and mechanical destiny. The Agony in the Garden, 17th century, Carlo Dolci. A religious scene of spiritual despair aligns with an Evangelion metamorphosis, where traditional suffering is reinterpreted as technological transcendence. Our Lady of Quito, 1906, Quito, Ecuador. A sacred art, pierced by swords, becomes a metaphor for the Eva series transformation, linking divine suffering to dissolution. Dante and Virgil in Hell, 1850, William Adolphe Bouguereau. Bouguereau's Dante's Inferno figures rise in torment, now overlaid with Shinji and Asuka's destructive confrontation. The classical depiction of eternal punishment resonates with Evangelion's psychological devastation. Virgin Mary, 17th century, Sassoferrato. Sassoferrato's Virgin Mary is eerily reinterpreted with Rei's detached presence. The nurturing maternal icon now embodies a clinical, post-human interaction, reflecting themes of identity and reproduction. The Suicide of Lucretia, 1525, Mester met des Papegayes. The Renaissance tragedy of Lucretia's suicide parallels the Eva series' self-impalement, shifting personal martyrdom into a programmed dissolution of self. Mrs. Luke Ionides, 1882, William Blake, Richmond. A Victorian portrait of refinement is interrupted by an ethereal Eva unit, transforming the image into a meditation on transcendence and dissolution of identity. Caron transfers the soul of deads over the Styx River. 1861, Konstantin Makovsky. Caron, Ferrying Souls, is repurposed for Unit 1's ascension, equating mythological passage with Evangelion's cosmic rebirth. Nuestra Señora de las Angustias, a Spanish religious icon, is covered by instrumentality's blank white space, symbolizing the rejection of collective consciousness in favor of individual choice. Female nude, 1897, Félix Vallotton. A Vallotton nude is overlaid with Rei's ghostly image, turning a study of human form into a reflection on intimacy and selfhood in Evangelion's fragmented world. Portrait of Victoire de France, 1750, Jean-Marc Natier. An aristocratic rococo portrait meets the red eye of Lilith passing as Rei, symbolizing the moment of radical choice, embracing individuality over collective dissolution. Mélancolie, 1801, Constance Marie Charpentier. A melancholic classical figure is fractured by Lilith's dissolution, expanding personal sorrow into a cosmic scale of transformation. The General Zapped an Angel, 1970, Karel Toll. A sci-fi landscape blends seamlessly with Rei's fragmented image, reframing Apocalypse as a restructuring of consciousness. Christ on Cross, 1869, Karl Heinrich Bloch. Bloch's crucifixion is infused with Lilith's containment, shifting sacrifice from a divine act to a technological imprisonment with latent potential for release. Portrait of Mary Robinson, 1781, Thomas Gainsborough. Gainsborough's Mary Robinson juxtaposed with Rei, reinterpreting the portrait's historical elegance to the narrative of survival and resilience. Young Girl Styling Her Hair, 1894, Pierre-Auguste Renoir. A Renoir portrait of private reflection is disrupted by Asuka's preparation for combat, turning an intimate moment into an exploration of identity under systemic pressure. Lucifero, 2013, Roberto Ferri. The The GIF uses a muscular human form with Ramiel, juxtaposing human fragility with cosmic intelligence. Traditional tones shift to digital blues. Geometric distortions disrupt the original composition. The starry backdrop transports the image beyond its earthly origins. Evangelion's mythology, colliding with classical masterpieces, creates a dialogue about transformation, both visual and existential. These images redefine artistic boundaries, proving that art is a living conversation, constantly evolving with new interpretations. What does it cost to watch Evangelion over and over for an entire year? Let's start with the obvious, Netflix. $17.99 a month, that's $215.88 annually, plus the cost of exactly 48 packets of Nissin noodle, your weekly diet from now on, $16.13. Next, therapy. You watched the final 2 episodes and thought, I could fix him, but then you realized you are him. 2 sessions a month at $150 each, because your insurance covers nothing, unless you're actively on fire. That's $3,600 a year, just to explain to a total stranger that the AT field is a metaphor for your fear of emotional intimacy. Now, caffeine. Because you decided 2 a.m. is the ideal time to rewatch the elevator scene, $4 a cup, 3 times a week, that's $624 annually to not fall asleep while wondering if Gendo is misunderstood or just an Asperger with a God complex. Of course, you bought books. Nietzsche, Freud, Kierkegaard. You read 14 pages in total, took 1 blurry photo for Instagram, and told your ex you were revisiting existential frameworks. That's $75 down the drain. You still don't know what Das Hubermensch means, but you do know that you are not him. How about merch? Ray figure? $55. Misato wall scroll? $30. Nerf hoodie? $70. You said it was ironic, but you wore it to Trader Joe's on purpose. Total, $155. You are the reason Amazon restocked the Asuka Pad. Evangelion is, give or take, 11 hours long. You watched it monthly. That's 132 hours. Multiply that by your freelance rate, $25 an hour, adjusted for inflation, and you sacrificed $3,300 worth of billable time. You told your customer base that you were in a client meeting. The client was depression. Crying in the shower, free. Phoning in the bath like Misato, $7.99 for scented Epsom salts. So your final total comes to $7,994. Was it worth it? Yes, because now you understand the hedgehog's dilemma and you achieve third impact on your bank account.